We're waiting on our solicitor, but we're going to get through the beginning portion of the agenda. Like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, and the time is 6:35. Determination of quorum. Mr. Kinney.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Reyes is excused tonight. Mr. Burke. Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Studley. Secretary Anderson. Vice Chair Kalunian. Chairman Flynn is here. We have a quorum of 8 tonight. Emergency evacuation, the doors you came in, you can go out, lead to the left, to the right. And if you would all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag.
United States of America, to the republic, stands one nation, God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Okay, first on the agenda tonight, approval of minutes, 5.1, May 28th, 2025. I have a motion on the minutes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have a public hearing next. We're going to wait for our solicitors to step in before we resume the meeting.
Mr. Chair, before we get started.
Oh, yes, before we get started, just for the record, thank you, John. John will be recusing himself from this application.
Yep.
Thank you, John, for the reminder. Hi, Dave. No problem. Next on the agenda is a public hearing for Highlands at Hopkins Hill Road. This is a continuation from May 28th. It's a preliminary plan, major land development, owner applicant, DT Homes and Company, portion of AP 13, Lot 22, Zone Business Park, Dante Boulevard. Applicant proposes 66 detached single-family condominium units and a vacant portion of a subject parcel along the internal roadways and association site amenities. Public water and sewer connections are anticipated. Is anybody here representing the applicant? Name and address, please.
All right. Joelle Rocha, attorney for the applicant and owner. Office at 321 South Main Street, Suite 400, Providence. Thank you for your time on this. I'm going to defer to the chair. I don't believe there are any open issues when we left last. I don't know if there are remaining technical questions that we could go through. I do want to get into some of the proposed conditions, but I don't want to get ahead of myself if there are outstanding technical concerns.
Oh, just for the record, we took care of the traffic
Yep.
issue as far as peer review.
Yep.
And if you want to continue on your issues with the
Okay.
Then my only comment is, I know that the applicant had prepared a stormwater related letter. They were going to bring hard copies of that tonight. Staff had no concerns with what was supplied there, but that may be worth disseminating to the board and having any discussion the applicant wants to bring on what that has.
Okay. I'll let the applicant's attorney go ahead.
We can certainly distribute that. We did submit it. I don't think it caught your packets. That was driven at, I don't think there were any stormwater issues the board had when we left last. There were questions that the planner and the town engineer had that we created a plan for. So we can certainly go through that if the board wants to.
I think if the staff is fine and our engineer is fine with it, I think I'm fine with it personally. I mean,
My suggestion would be if the applicant could give us one copy, we'll accept it as an exhibit. Technically, it's not made part of the record yet. It's not on the website. We can accept it for the record. Again, staff have no concerns with the content of that letter. It was describing the scenarios around if stormwater overflow, where would that go? And if the board wishes to, I mean, you haven't seen the letter. If the board wishes to hear any content about it, a quick summary, that's up to you. Again, we're comfortable at staff, so I'd only ask one letter
Board
be
members?
provided as an exhibit.
I just have a question. I don't recall. Was that a concern of the neighbors and the abutters that we didn't know where the water was going to go? It just didn't come up. They just,
No, they actually said, the head of the condo association said their detention ponds don't overflow.
and okay, so this was just some due diligence and you submitted it.
Yeah, I think there was just a staff level question about where the water goes. Obviously, we didn't design the full project 20 years ago, but Greg was able to put something together and show that.
yeah, if you want to submit a letter, we're fine. I mean, I'm fine. If any other board members have any issues.
For the record, let's mark this as applicant exhibit 1.
Okay,
Okay. I'm gonna,
okay, thank you.
all right. So I'm gonna dive right in now. We have the staff report with the recommendations, and I'd just like to go through a few of those, specifically starting off with conditions of approval, which is on page 7 of 8. It starts at the bottom of page 7 and 8. The first one, which is a limitation on the 2 and 3 bedroom units in a ratio of 6:1. This one came out of left field for us when we received the staff report and the proposal late Friday night. We didn't believe there was any concern with respect to the 2 and 3 bedroom mix. We haven't settled on what that would be. Greg is here and can talk about market conditions, but we don't really know where this came from or the basis for it. So we're seeking to have that stricken, but we can provide further detail about the market for these units. We said at the last meeting, these units are going to be between roughly 1,200 square feet and 1,700 square feet. And that's where we're at. But I can bring Greg up. He can give a little.
I think
Oh.
just adding, we did not receive a preliminary plan of fiscal impact, so the bedrooms will definitely change the fiscal impact. We did not get a fiscal impact.
So what,
That
yeah,
was-
it's not it wasn't a requirement.
I think that's the concern. Normally, we get a fiscal impact on every project, so I think that was the main concern on the bedroom count. But we can talk about it.
Yep. Greg, you want to come?
Greg Guglielmo, Dupree Engineering, offices at 2 Stafford Court, Cranston, Rhode Island. Really, the difference between the 2 and 3 bedroom now is, and a lot of this has changed post-pandemic, is that really, and some architectural designs have changed since the pandemic. People are getting away from kind of the open concept that they had years ago, where you would see these kind of large rooms that would be used for a home office and a gaming room and entertainment. People are heading more towards, especially those that are working from home, of wanting a separate, smaller type office space that's dedicated for office. Then when you start getting into the age-targeted developments such as this, you are seeing a lot of folks wanting that 3rd, sometimes even 4th bedroom in homes, specifically for this is my office, this is the guest room, this is the sewing room. So the terminology of bedroom that we use today, or it has been used historically for these rooms because they have a closet in them doesn't necessarily they're going to be used to house children. These are targeted towards folks that, for the most part, are going to have children that are out of school age. You will find in some of these, and I think there are a few in this development now, that will have younger children. So you could see someone kind of early in their career where they want a smaller home, doesn't have a yard, they have a 2-year-old that really doesn't play a lot outside, but usually at some point they move out of these types of developments. So the developer's really just looking for the option and not have it be locked into a 2-bedroom restriction, which is not on any of the rest of it. If someone wanted to put a 3rd bedroom in the basement of one of the units, as long as they can meet fire code or building code, I believe they could do it. So we're kind of looking for the same thing, where it'd be an option of them being able to put this 3rd room in here. If it came to it and we weren't allowed to put closets in it, I think he would be amenable to that, but it's still the same intent. It's a room. I think most of when you're talking about the fiscal impact and talking about school-age children, it's really what we're targeting towards. These are not developments that bring in school-age children. So regardless if it was a 4-bedroom unit, they're just not going to bring in a large amount of children.
Anybody else have any questions?
Usually these developments don't bring in the children because they're 2 or 1 bedroom. So being a 3-bedroom might spark the intuitive idea to do so.
Yeah, what usually ends up happening is it's based on a price point. So if I can get a 3-bedroom home on a 1/4 of an acre lot, where I'm not paying a homeowners association fee and I can take care of my own yard, most of the time that's where that person would skew. There's no tot lot here. There's no room to put a swing set in your backyard. You're not putting a pool in your backyard, all those things that really cater towards it. So it's really not just the bedroom, it's the whole amenity. It's like I've had discussions before with folks where they talk about driveway lengths. And someone says, well, I have 4 cars in my driveway. Okay, well, you're not going to buy here. You can't fit 4 cars in these driveways. You're going to fit 2. So it's kind of the same thing where you're going to say, hey, the amenities that I need for my 10-year-old just aren't here, and I can get that somewhere else for the same price point. And most of these bedrooms, really, I mean, they could make a 2-bedroom unit that has a 20 by 20 bedroom, and you could fit 4 kids in it. So, I mean, the fact that you're just making them 2 10 by 10 bedrooms, I don't know if that increases the amount of people you're going to have in the home. It's still the same general square footage as we've talked about. So you just kind of, again, it gets back to if you think of homes that were built in the 50s and 60s, they were kind of broken up a lot more. People are starting to get back to that where they want these dedicated spaces for these things and not these large shared spaces.
Sure, but it still gives the potential, right?
Absolutely.
The potential for more traffic, more kids, and that's why I think it was raised about the
Yeah, and
3rd bedroom.
again, I don't.
It's a legitimate
It is.
request, I
Yep.
guess.
And I understand that. It's I just don't see the bedrooms as the driver of that. I said there's way more pieces than that. Obviously, if you had a 2-bedroom home, but if I really need to, and it's the only place that I could do it, there's families that would put 4 people in a bedroom. I mean, my dad lived in a 400 square foot house when he was a kid with his grandparents and his aunt and his uncle and his parents. I mean, people do it. Doesn't matter how many bedrooms there are. I think it's more about the market conditions.
88%, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead.
So, and I can dig into this because they play off of each other. So, and I did want to bring up, one thing Greg mentioned is that the bedroom restriction and as also the 80% 55 restriction is not on the existing Highlands. It's not in the condo docs. It's not anywhere. It's not anywhere in CNE. So we don't have the ability to amend condo docs and limit anything with respect to this development. To jump ahead, and we can talk about both of these at once, the 55 plus restriction exists in a 2003 master plan approval that you might as well throw in the trash. Because if you look at the rest of the conditions in that, they dropped out. They dropped out by way of court actions and consent orders. One of the conditions in that is We're not approving the number of units at master plan in 2003. You deal with that later. And then there's a consent order that says it's 311 units and master plan is amended. The age restriction doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not in preliminary. I have all those documents. And it's not, but primarily, you're talking about a master plan that governed the entire center of New England. There's no age restriction on the apartments. There's none on the condos. We can't amend the condo documents of the Highlands to put either the 2-bedroom restriction or the age restriction on.
I was questioning because I read it in the report.
Yes.
You just kind of told me that's not the case. And
Correct.
so I guess I kind of have to.
Where Doug's getting it from is a master plan approval. I'm providing the context of the appeals and the consent orders, and that went by the wayside.
I think it's important too, because I know Mr. Bannon's here tonight, but I read through the traffic report, and it really states because of age restriction, there would be a limited traffic. So if you get rid of the age restriction, is that,
There's no age restriction. So,
well, it's an 80%
no, there's no age.
over 55.
No, that's what I'm saying is your planner is citing to a 2003 master plan approval, which
You're
was
doing that with the
meant-
engineering also.
What?
You're going back to the engineering from that era. But you see,
But I'm telling you, you can't put an age restriction on a development that doesn't have an age restriction. So that age restriction dropped out in amendments and all that stuff and preliminary plan. It does not
I'm
exist.
going to defer to our solicitor on
want
that
clarity.
because I need clarity. I'm not an attorney, so.
No, I remember reading some of these months ago, but I can't give you a definitive answer today. I mean, if Ms. Rocha is representing that the court documents dropped them out, I'll verify that for the board, but I wouldn't stop the board.
I
from
just want to make
forward.
sure because it does say, 80%.
I understand. I understand what's going on.
Mm.
There's a reference to an old master plan that has an age restriction, but then there's been a series of litigation and court documents that generated a consent agreement that Roach is indicating may have removed that requirement. So I think, I'll verify that, and I'm sure the planner is right that the master plan has it, and I'm sure Ms. Rocha, as an officer of the court, is right that the consent decree says what it says, but I'll do my due diligence on behalf of the board.
Appreciate that.
And the only reason I brought it up was because I was going to say the 3-bedroom issue kind of becomes moot if there is an age restriction. But if you're saying there's not an age restriction, we'll go forward. So maybe it would be better to have you check all the boxes first before we start up. You know what I'm saying? Because I got ahead of myself on that one, but they might be interrelated. So
Right. So, no, and I saw where you were going on that, but I think fundamentally, regardless of where it is, the restriction doesn't exist in center of New England now. So you would be asking to put an age restriction on a portion of a condominium association that there's no age restriction in the Highlands right now. And we are joining the Highlands. I don't know how you do that.
I just got confused with the traffic report because it states age
I mean,
restricted.
realistically, this is going,
Confusing to us reading it. We're reading the traffic report
yeah,
by a traffic engineer and it's stating age restricted.
yeah, I'm not sure that changes come on up, Paul. I don't remember that.
He can clarify it, but I read it. I know I read it.
Paul Bannon, Crossman Engineering, 100 Jefferson Boulevard, Warwick, Rhode Island. You read the term age restricted, but it was a description of the type of units in the project that we used a conservative single-family detached housing, CHIP generation, which is a regular subdivision. So when describing that, this is a new type development where they're single-family detached. They're not condos, but they're condo. Small lot, no lots, small buildings close together. So it's describing that as which is typical of a retirement community or an age-restricted community. That's what I said. I didn't say this
For
was.
clarification,
And the numbers we used were single-family detached, which could be a 4-bedroom, single-family home on a 1-acre lot.
okay, thank you.
That makes more sense.
Yes, it was a little confusing, yeah.
No, it was a good question. Makes So that's, we can continue to talk about these two conditions. I think, from a realistic standpoint, there are some lots that are on the smaller, when I say lots, these are gonna be land condos, and you'll hear that, later on, but there are some on the smaller end, so you're not talking 66 three-bedroom units. I just think limiting it to 11 three-bedroom units, we're going to have buyers that want the den, that want the office, that may want, it may be a couple that they each want a bedroom. So, I don't want to limit the marketability of
I
this.
understand the applicant too, that, it's
Yeah.
market driven.
Yep.
He did say there would be a mix.
There will be a mix,
So, I mean, is it half and half? We didn't really have a number,
right?
but, that was, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I,
I know there's some of the lots you just are not going to put a three-bedroom
Right.
as she stated.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, based on the engineering design that was kind of done previously, there were some we just couldn't fit a larger unit. But some of those also, the developer is looking at one-car garage units. So for the same thing, you may have, a single person that really doesn't need a two-car garage, doesn't store a lot of things, but they'd rather have a smaller den instead of a two-car garage. So allowing that flexibility, but we're kind of limited in the footprint of how big we can make these, and also they're all only one story. So there's no two-story units. So it's, we can't build a 5,000 square foot house here. There's not enough room to do it.
Thank you. Any other questions for any board members on the clarification of bedrooms and?
Up to number 2. Keep going.
all right. So there are two options of how to handle the rest of my comments. There's an easy option and there's we're going to be here a while option. We, in between the last meeting and this meeting, I think we mentioned there were some engineering comments, which we got last minute and tried to schedule a meeting before the last meeting, and it just didn't happen. We did that on June 6th. We met with the town engineer and went through comments. We had what we thought was a very good meeting, getting some clarification. To back up a minute, a lot of these comments in the construction level requirements are not in the regulations. So we're trying to, get clarity at that meeting to what are you really looking for? Because it really isn't in the scope of preliminary plan, but let's all be on the same page. So we left there kind of thinking everybody was on the same page, and asking to get that revision to make sure quickly so we could do that ahead of this meeting. The town engineer did email us the 18th and listed, and this deals with the certificate of conformance portion, and listed a bunch of things generally on the same page. And then we got the staff report the evening of the 20th with different language. So we've been trying to work with the town engineer, and I actually think we're pretty close with him as to what the language is. And I had drafted that up to present to you tonight, and we can certainly go through my red lines versus what's proposed. I don't believe the town engineer is here tonight. So this deals with conditions 5B, which is the requested changes to B of 14 made by the town engineer and described in the TRC report. And conditions 8 and 9, which deal with certificates of conformance. And there is much more clarity. These are the conditions we needed, we had to sit down on. My suggestion first is to take those conditions out, but put a condition in that says, in between now and final plan approval, the applicants to work with the town engineer to address concerns regarding requested changes to sheet 3 of 14 made by the town engineer, and required certificates of conformance. And should we not come to terms, then we come back to this board for final plan approval. That's my suggestion. I can painstakingly go through the technical details of each different proposal, which ends up being a lot more conditions based on exchanges of emails. But they are technical in nature. I can go through them. I just want to pose it to the board first.
I think I'm going to defer that to staff because we really go by what our staff recommends. Are you okay with that condition? If you can't work it out, they come back for final?
No, I think staff stands by the conditions as they're written now. There has been discussion with the engineer. The engineer is familiar with what is in the conditions and in the recommendation that's in front of you, and he's comfortable with that. There has been discussion with the applicant in the last few days in terms of them asking to make changes, and the applicant and the engineer has an email stating and reiterating why they're standing by their comments. So there has been discussion on should we change these conditions or not. The engineer's been part of that discussion, and he feels comfortable with how it stands as it's written here. There was one item amongst what the applicant presented in terms of some of their concerns with the comments, and there was one item in which the town engineer indicated on this particular item, his comment number 5, he had language that he was going to offer to basically clarify and augment what his TRC comment is. So staff has that tonight, which would be a minor amendment to the conditions. It would really modify one of the engineer's comments in reflection of these discussions with the applicant. And I can read what that would be just so you're familiar with your permission.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the engineer is basically, and this is an email that was shared with the applicant. This is just from an email exchange that was going back and forth the last few days. The condition number 5B, as it shows up in your recommendation, it starts requested changes to sheet 3 of 14 made by the town engineer and described in the May 19th TRC report. Then that language would further read that the comment from the town engineer under plans, comment number 5, shall be understood as follows. Proof of valid testing and written verification by contractor shall be provided to the town engineer at substantial completion of construction phases, and such proof shall be provided before certificates of occupancy are issued. So I think the town engineer is acknowledging that that particular item, which has to do with the minimum separation distance between the slab and the seasonal high water table, that verification can be provided by the contractor. So I think that's the augmentation, and that's based on extensive discussion back and forth with the applicant. The town engineer wanted to stand on the other issues as they're written.
Entirely incorrect assessment of.
If I can just jump in, this is not just because of this application. That I think the town's being consistent with this certificate.
Yeah, the language that you guys see in conditions number 8 and 9 on your plan that discuss the term a certificate of conformance, and that was language that was focus of our meeting with the applicant in early June, and has been the focus of email discussions over the past week. That language that you're seeing verbatim has been in a series of other decisions that we've written and voted on. That's the standard that the engineer is seeking for all projects to provide basically a level set, an even bar for all applications to assist the engineer in their process of inspection. So that is not a unique, those two conditions, 8 and 9, are not unique to this project. That is exactly verbatim what we've had in the last several decisions at a preliminary plan scale on other projects.
And that's wonderful, but what you are bound by are the regulations. So we're trying to find a happy medium, because your regulations applicable to this project have say the town engineer inspects and has a list of things, mainly dealing with public infrastructure, roadways, and where the inspections happen. That's what the town's stuck by. Now, whether you've amended your regulations, these are 1997 regulations, whether you've amended your regulations to allow for all this stuff that's going in the decisions, I don't know. I'll deal with that on another project. But right now, if there's no movement on this, then this board is bound by the provisions that are in the regulations. I have them, I can provide them. We have them flagged out what the provisions are. There are no private infrastructure inspection requirements. But even if you took the public infrastructure requirements, they are very basic in nature. We are trying to work with the town. I don't believe this language is consistent. Greg can speak to this. We have a really great proposal that just refused to be considered last minute, but we went back and forth through emails. And I think we can get there as this happy medium. Otherwise, I'm going to ask the board to take them out completely and refer back to the applicable regulations in this, which we are vested in. So, we're doing our best to try to work with that, but the excuse that, well, this is what we do on the applications, well, this one's vested as in the 1997 regulation. So I'll let Greg weigh in.
Name and address, please.
Greg Guglielmo, Dupree Engineering, 2 Stafford Court. In terms of certificate of conformance, I believe we came to a pretty good consensus with the town engineer that there's a state form that pretty much clearly outlines what needs to be done on large commercial scale projects, which we kind of consider this, and we're in general agreement of that. The language that Joe Levesque came back with was that mid last week, we are in general agreement with. There's a few things on the plans that we thought we had resolved in our meeting that we still would like to discuss around just kind of some language around items like, what it means by any changes. We just wouldn't want to be in a situation where, and we talked about this the last time, and where we're still concerned, where if we change a unit the way we have it schematically drawn on our engineering plans, we'd have to come back, submit a building permit plan or a sketch for that would be above and beyond what's required as part of the regulations. So those are kind of the things that we're kind of wrestling with right now, is that we just wouldn't want to come back as we added a porch to something. We want to come back as we added a bulkhead. This says any changes. So that's what we're trying to clarify with the engineer and the planner. And I think we're pretty close on it. I think there's just some semantics probably in the way we need to word these.
Maybe instead of any changes, maybe major changes.
Yeah, and and even that,
Just throwing it out there.
yeah, even that, the words major and minor mean something different to everyone. We've had these discussions not just in Coventry, but in a lot of towns where, someone puts in what I call a decorative landscape wall. They put in a couple of boulders on the side of a house, and someone says, well, that's a structural change. You could build it without the retaining, without the boulder wall and be the same thing. So, we're just trying to figure out, not just here, everywhere that we work as a firm, what's major and what's minor. So we're kind of looking out not only for our applicants, but these future homeowners that could, have to bear this cost if there's additional costs or as-built or design plans that are necessary for these types of things that may have been considered minor, but now they're part of an approval.
And I don't want you to dig into that. You can do that if you want, but I just want you to see them to see, this isn't stripped of all this language. It's all in there. It's just a matter of tweaking language. We can't go build the units without final plan. So I'm not sure what, to hold it up at preliminary plan or stuff that is in the regulations, we're willing to work. And if we're not, we're back in front of you for this discussion before we can build a unit. It just makes more sense, but I'm happy to provide the copy of what we did circulate today. Try to reach a middle ground on, just to show you, there's a long laundry list of conditions. I think we're pretty close to there.
Do you want to take it as an exhibit or?
Yeah, the applicant's welcome to provide
I
it.
just wanted to ask my solicitor that, are we bound by the regulations of the past? Or are we bound by the regulations of now,
Regulations of the past.
of the past? Okay, I
That's what the consent,
needed that clarification.
consent
'cause
decree actually provides that. I haven't read it in a while, but I believe it.
We're going quite a ways back in time, so I just wanted for clarification.
Could I just, Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind? So I just want to kind of recap where we are right now. Going over the stipulations, you don't want the number one restriction in there as a stipulation at all. Do you have any sense, will there be more than 50% of the 60 some odd units to be 3-bed, or is it non-committal at this point? I know the applicant, he's not here, so.
Yeah, I mean,
In all likelihood, based on the size of the lots, what's your gut feeling?
yeah, I think there was 12 of them that we knew could not fit a larger unit. So they were either going to be they were either going to be a 1-car garage or a 2-bedroom unit. So that was kind of our, the rest of
Well,
the.
it won't
would
be more
fit.
than 75%, won't be more than
But that's probably about the number. I mean,
Just
I'd
in
have to
case.
do the math. but
worst
yeah.
case, scenario,
Right.
best case scenario.
Yeah.
And by the way, I empathize with that. In my age bracket, my kids are grown, but they don't live nearby. So if I want them to come with the grandson, I need the 2 beds.
Yeah.
And my wife would use one as an office. So that's what we have now. We'd love to get out of a house and to get into a place like that. I've looked over there,
Yeah.
one with a walkout basement. So, and what you're saying is 2 doesn't apply and it shouldn't be there at all. You're okay with with 3, 4. It's only when we get to 5B. And 5B, if I could just delve into that a little bit, do you know the water table on all these lots? I mean, if you start doing the foundations and it's the dry season, how is the contractor that's actually doing the work going to provide that type of
Yeah, so, I
certification?
mean, that's pretty common throughout the state. I mean, one thing that we do, as far as our firm, we do general testing. That's what's required through DEM. That's required for us to proof out the design of where we believe the foundation should be set. We've set them all 2 to 3 feet above what we believe the groundwater table is at.
And when you say believe, is that based on?
Based on,
or you
our data, our test holes that we dug.
Okay.
So, but never in the 33 years that I've done this has anyone dug a test hole in every single hole prior to the design.
And do these houses have full basements?
They do. So what normally ends up happening with this, and this happens all the time, there are cases where the groundwater table is high, and we recommend, or in sometimes in conjunction, the planning staff or the engineer recommends that there is additional testing done. In this site, we're pretty confident, our engineers are pretty confident that we're not going to hit groundwater. We didn't. I mean, we think it's 12 to 15 feet for the most part, but however, there may be some times when you dig a hole for a foundation and you look at it and go, these soils aren't what we thought they were going to be. That's where we rely a lot of times on the building official who's out there, inspects the bottom of that hole and says, I don't think these soil conditions meet what you're saying on the plans. We need additional testing done. We believe that's normally how it should work, especially on a site like this. I think I mentioned the last time, I live in Weston Cranston, and Weston Cranston at one point was all farmland, and it's all pretty much a foot water table. And so, the project that I live in specifically was required that they do that. And, I get that in some places. I just don't see it on this site. I mean, with the soil types and all the other homes that are built out there, I don't think we're going to have a groundwater issue.
With close to 1,000 units on the table, that's an awful lot of work for one building official to go out and check all those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the process, though. I mean, I don't.
Unfortunately, that's part, it sounds to me like that's what the town engineer was trying to say. He wants to kind of shift some of that inspection.
Yeah, and maybe that's the case. But I don't know how that works if they're paying a building official to go out there and inspect it. So, I mean, I don't know.
Well, how many times does he go out and what does he inspect? That's my guess. He could check certain things.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on how they do that, but I believe they go out and check the bottom of the hole before the footings are placed. So I could be mistaken on that, but if they do, that would be the time to.
Okay.
to check that. If that's not the case, then I'd say there needs to be a regulatory change, not
Okay.
you know, something undue burden on one developer.
We know about the local permits, and then when we get down to this, the engineer of record shall submit a certificate of conformance prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So what's the challenge with that?
The only challenge that we had, and again, Joe Levesque had submitted some additional language that further clarified it for us, and we were in general agreement with that language. Where our major concern is that you could probably build 2 or 3 units and start building them almost immediately once you get approval. But there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built, and most of these are built in phases. So to have to give a certificate of conformance for the whole development, it would be very hard for us to do that without all the units in place, without all the drainage in place. I mean, some of these are right off of Dante Boulevard. You'd be able to start construction on them almost immediately.
Where there is a milestone, providing, in short of waiting till the end, where some big infrastructure is complete, providing a certificate of conformance related to that. So that's the language tweaking. And this is an exercise of, these are really broad statements and conditions. And even when you reference back to TRC, it talks about as built and all this stuff we had already had a whole conversation about. And it talks about language where we're talking about minor and major. And it's really important that if these are gonna go in a planning board decision, that we are all on the same page as to what, because we don't wanna get to the building permit stage and we're fighting over what it means. And then we're back in front of you or at the state building code commission. So I really think it's an exercise at final plan to attempt to, again, agree upon stuff that I don't think we need to agree upon, but give us an opportunity to really tweak that. But I don't think preliminary plan should be held up.
Well, I happen to agree. I heard from our solicitor that, we are bound by the past procedures. If it's clear, it's clear. Just it was so unclear that, it's confusing to the board. And Doug, you have something to say to that?
Yeah, in terms of the regulations largely are silent on the engineers, what's needed for them to effectuate a good inspection. So the regulations don't prohibit the engineer from requesting information and certifications from an applicant to demonstrate that their built product is in conformance with their designed product. Generally does describe, even the past regulations aren't too different from our current regulations. It's not an issue of an era of regulations. It's an issue of interpreting that code. And do the regulations limit the engineer from asking the applicant to provide certifications that what they've built is in conformance with the design, which we don't think is a reach. I can say that the language that we have, and the applicant is welcome to opine upon any language they wish to bring, but that, inspections occur at the direction of the town engineer. That's language that's in the old code. It's language in the current code. Under the direction of the town engineer, they can ask for documentation to back that up. So, I mean, the applicant might also opine that there's no inspection standards specifically called out for private infrastructure. And that would mean, okay, well, I don't know if that's correct, that a piece of private infrastructure would go online with no inspection whatsoever from the town engineer. So there's a lot of interpretation of what this means. My comment to the board would be, we're willing to engage in these more detailed discussions with the applicant. We've certainly exchanged a lot of emails in the past week or few days. I wouldn't feel particularly comfortable with making some of these decisions on limiting the engineer's scope of what they've sought to do on a regular basis without the engineer being involved in those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agree with that. That's where we would like Joe Levesque's language put in, because he really did work through this. And we had a long conversation with him about how, I mean, our firm regularly inspects most of the projects that we work on. We understand that this is where, although to Doug's point, a lot of the regulations are silent to it. We inspect them a lot of times at the request of the developer, who's making sure that the contractor is doing things right. But we are also getting to the point now where we are submitting a lot of that information to municipalities, and we're very aware of that. And we also agree with the language that Joe submitted to us. It's pretty much in line with what the state law outlines for these inspections, that it's done on a regular interval that's decided upon by the town engineer and the owner and the engineer of record. It's something that we do quite commonly. So we're in general agreement with that, and that's where we would rather have, again, Joe's language put into place rather than what was on the.
So what I think you're looking for is a condition of approval. Not to have to come back to final unless you can't get these set up.
Basically, a direction, you know, applicant
You
shall.
would
work
want
with the
final
town engineer,
administrative, correct? If possible.
if possible.
Right. Okay.
But, you know, the applicant shall work with the town engineer to, address changes, address comments in the TRC report and address requirements for certificate of conformance. And then if we can't come to terms,
We'll come back for final.
we'll go through each one.
I'm sorry, I'm still on number 8. So if I understood you correctly, the issue with number 8 is all the infrastructure in the development may not be built before he wants to sell and issue a certificate of occupancy, let's say for 3 dwellings. The infrastructure may be complete in that section, but not the other sections.
Right.
So what you're really, and if again, I don't want to put word in anyone's mouth, but the idea is that there has to be a certificate of conformance for everything that's been built to date, kind of. Well, I'm trying to grasp.
That's a problem with how they're written right now, I think, is what does it mean? And we can't get a CO for anything until the roadway's done. And so that's,
Well,
I mean, our proposed conditions are much lengthier and much more detailed than this. And they're different in some instances based on conversations, and based on some flexibility. When it talks about the units, I think Greg mentioned that our discussion was the units are typical units. One of the issues was it shows, you know, typical unit, and that comment's not acceptable, except this is and I'll show you just for, I don't need to enter it, but these are the. And that's what, they went from that to building permit. So understanding we're finding a middle ground here, but that's the phases that's how they were approved. So we did say, let's build in that box then. Just let us have the flexibility. We're gonna contract with a homeowner who wants to build. And we had this conversation last time, it'd be 7, 8 types of houses, the style of which the homeowners association has to approve. And let us just fit it in this box with the understanding we're not gonna mess up drainage or grading, and give us, doesn't need to be, there's language in that TRC. If this is the condition and the reference, you're talking an as-built on every house, that's how it reads. And that's one of the main reasons we had the meeting, because we don't want to be in this situation. We pull a building permit, we go to get a CO, and an as-built for the house you showed, that's generally the same, maybe, a foot off of grading. We've had that issue already, and I think it's important that everybody be on the same page to get this thing across.
And if you did phase development, the roadways for the whole development wouldn't be constructed if you did it by phase, and that, we've done that in the past. So
Yeah.
if he did 3 phases.
Right, and
You
this
wouldn't
is
have all the
obviously.
roads built for all 3 phases.
Right, this is different because it's a private development. These aren't public roads where you'd have bonding for a certain section of the road, and, but this would be built the same way. There's no way financially that he's gonna build all the roads at once, get that all approved, then start building
It's
homes.
understandable.
So that's really we're trying to figure out, again, we understand how it works in terms of the inspections. We do these all the time. We're in general agreement with the town engineer. So I think it's just understanding, okay, well, what can we give you in the meantime to make sure that this meets the intent of what you're trying to do for these units that are built? Okay, now for this section, now for this section.
Rick, before I think staff just has a quick comment.
Yeah, I actually wanted to find out what the town's position was on that. I mean, and it sounds like the statement that was here was basically to say, hey, listen, we don't want to issue a certificate of occupancy unless we're sure that everything that they've built or have on the plan is built to the spec.
Yeah, and it should be understood that, it's well understood that the applicant might wish to build in informal phases. They may build the first few houses, seek building permits for those first few houses, then keep moving as they go and build as they go. The intent, and this has been the approach that we've taken over the past year with inspections, is that we understand that not all of the infrastructure needs to be built to achieve those first handful of C of Os, but the infrastructure related to those houses needs to be built. And if we're going to issue a C of O, then we want to know that there's a certificate for that area. If there's a roadway that a new house buyer is using to reach their house, then we want to know that the roadway was built in conformance with the design. And we want to have assurances of that. If there's stormwater infrastructure that the particular houses in question are utilizing, we want to know that we have a certification that's built in accordance with design. We're not seeking for the entire subdivision for a certification of conformance for the entire subdivision to give the first CO, but for every CO we give, we want to know that the associated infrastructure we've got certifications on.
So how come that's not the condition in number 8 instead of the way that it's?
Yeah, and I think that's how the engineer has interpreted that. And I'm willing to have a discussion with the engineer, but what I'm nervous about is this is the phase of plan, the preliminary plan phase where we generally have utilized the same language. And my suggestion would be, let's have a discussion with the engineer, and perhaps there's a desire to continue this meeting so that we can have a discussion and make sure we get this right at the preliminary plan phase while it's still in front of you. And then the concept is a final plan can be handled administratively if we pencil it all out. And perhaps all it needs is a bit of a tweak to the language where it might read, the engineer of record shall submit a certificate of conformance for the applicable infrastructure prior to the issuance of certificates. I can tell you that's how the town engineer interprets it, and a lot of the follow-up conversation has been about the engineers providing clarification on how he interprets what does a certificate of conformance need to meet. That's those emails we've had over the last week. So we're happy to revisit that. My hesitation is let's not make changes on the fly in ways that we may not be anticipating what the engineer's familiar with,
Well,
and then vote on it tonight. My suggestion is if we're going to revisit, we can certainly revisit and come back in another month.
right, because we don't know if what the engineer is saying is like, well, no, I want to make sure they've actually done up to here, even if it's not applicable to those buildings, and that may
Yeah.
or may not be fair, so to speak. And then when you get into number 9, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to defer to the solicitor on this, I understand certificates of occupancy and certificates of conformance with things that are related to health and safety, fire cisterns, things that affect a specific unit. There's no town infrastructure in this subdivision whatsoever. So,
Right. But we're again trying to find a happy middle ground. I would submit 2 points. One, preliminary plan has nothing to do with construction level conditions. So there's no issue with the proposed condition I'm making, and let us work on this thing. But to your point, that's one of the main points when we sat down.
so fire cisterns I see, signage, fencing, landscape, and so it's got to be built per plan in the end. But are you putting survey markers and monuments throughout this? None required. And roadway, sub-base, pavement, curbing, concrete,
Exactly.
trails,
Right.
homeowners association.
Correct.
So they've got to check it.
Yes. And even you're talking sewer, I mean, we pay inspections for sewer, we pay inspections for all of that.
But I would assume that, right, the sewer is going to be inspected by the people that are operating the sewers. The same thing with the water. Kent County Water is going to come out and inspect that, so the town doesn't have to concern themselves with that unless they get a deficiency notice from Kent County. Hey, they don't have adequate potable water in that dwelling, don't issue the CO.
100%.
Okay.
And I think that's everything, each of this has a cost, right? And this is a 66 unit condo. Association that you can only build so much. So you're paying the inspection for Kent County Water on each piece of infrastructure. Just to highlight, I'm going to give you all a hypothetical, right? What we've heard tonight is, well, that's not what the engineer intends it to this condition and mean this. And this is where we got into this. Let's all meet to see what we're actually talking about. And that's why our conditions are 3 pages. So everybody understands, because what happens when the town engineer leaves and Doug's team leaves and we're stuck with the condition as written that says you can't get a CO or you need to provide a certificate of conformance on every single detail of your project, because that's how it reads existing. And everybody's gone, and that's what we're stuck with, and we're hung up at a CO with the homeowner's financing expires tomorrow, you know? So I think it serves everybody's best interest to allow us the time before final to try to work this out and in a reasonable manner.
And it sounds like you'll be joining the existing homeowners association?
Yes.
What I'm hearing.
Yep.
Okay, so that's on the record. You will be joining that homeowners association.
That is the plan. If we don't, for strange reason where we've got, God knows how these conditions all play in. But I mean, for example, we're not going to be able to join if there's an age restriction, because we're allowed to add, we can't tweak.
They're just adding units to theirs, amending their condo docs to add these units
these
and then
fees.
set all the fees and all that stuff.
With the exact same,
Yep.
everything that's already in there.
Well, I think our solicitor actually agreed upon what you said as far as, you know, you're going back to that age.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm comfortable with that because he's comfortable with it.
Yep.
I'm just trying to feel out, you know, do we vote tonight and not continue and vote tonight with the stipulation to come back with final if the staff cannot agree? I'm sure the solicitor will be involved also in these negotiations. I'm going to let that over to the board. I mean,
I was going to ask, what's their preference?
I think we're looking for a preliminary plan approval tonight. We can't build until we have final plan and record a final plan. I don't think these conditions, construction level conditions, are necessary. I don't think they're allowed, but I don't think they're necessary at preliminary. I don't think, if there was some reason that like, oh, we got you can't do this at final, we're offering this condition to try to work with the town. I don't see any harm in approving it. I don't think as we've talked about, these conditions are not clear. You cannot approve these as is. And to drag preliminary plan along another month, you know, we want to get financing in place. We want to get moving, subject to just there's nothing else out there. We're not waiting on a state approval. We're not waiting on anything else. We're going to figure out these conditions, which are, again, building permit level conditions. They could completely come out and we deal with them later on. We're asking to deal with them at final, which is earlier than I think we really have to.
okay, I'm pretty clear on it. Does anybody on the board have any other questions? Because we still have to, I left public hearing open. Solicitor, you have anything to add?
I think the issue is properly presented in the real issue in my mind is we have the input from the engineer in writing, but where you can see that there's been discussions going back and forth. And if the board has to get into those weeds with the engineer, you'd want the engineer here, and that's not going to happen tonight.
So the condition.
That's how I feel it.
So stating a condition, if we do vote tonight, would be acceptable.
I know that's against the planning's recommendation, and I know he feels strongly about that. I've had discussions with him, so I never like to take issue with your planner who's an expert. But I do think that that would be certainly a consideration the board it should be an option the board considers to move this along. I was concerned about the timeline. We might be up against a 90-day timeline, and you don't want to. I don't think the board should have a Mexican standoff on that. Say, you won't vote it your way, and they won't give you an extension. I think you should better move it.
I think because.
I don't know where we are on that, but
It's a unique application because we're going back in
it
time.
is.
And I think this board, I mean, we have solicitors, we have engineers. I think you guys can come to the table and come, I don't think it's far apart. Doesn't sound like it's far apart, especially if he phases. I mean, you can't expect everything to be done on the whole project if you're phasing, you know, the first,
Yeah, it's
20 houses, 20 units.
I thought the door was gonna be closed on the board. I would be against it strongly.
I think a couple updates. One is, in terms of timing, we did count the number of days versus when a certificate of completeness was offered. And ironically, the last day of 90 days is the date of the meeting. However, when you look at state law, it talks about needing a decision within that 90 days. It talks about that the approval should be as part of a decision. In my interpretation, that means that we are up against the clock, that the July meeting of this board, we wouldn't have a recorded decision by that evening. So we're right up against it. And so if there is a discussion about an extension of this preliminary plan phase, there should be an acknowledgement from the applicant to extend the 90-day clock. Put that aside for a second. I will say that in private developments and private infrastructure, roadways and stormwater, the town engineer is responsible for still reviewing and inspecting that to ensure that there's conformance with the design. Those do touch on public safety issues. If there's a roadway that isn't built to a certain standard, then that does create safety issues. So the town engineer does take their role and responsibility seriously, but they do rely on the applicant being able to certify, and this is our standard process. I think I'm very comfortable with the idea that, for example, let's talk about tweaking that language around the engineer of record, which would be the applicant's engineer shall submit a certification of conformance prior to the issuance of certificates of occupancy for the proposed buildings. If we need to talk about for the related infrastructure, we can. I'm a little nervous that the applicant has a series of very detailed changes that were delivered to us via email about 4 hours before the meeting that the town engineer has not seen. So I'm a little nervous making that the new decision of record and then tweaking after the fact. If there's a goal to work on this and there's good faith on both sides, and I think there is good faith on both sides to work towards, I'm comfortable with evaluating that language and making sure that it's clear that the entire subdivision doesn't need to be built. I know the town engineer is comfortable, but I'd like to then revisit with the idea that what we have in front of us, all of the conditions, all of the comments, which the town engineer has reviewed and reviewed all of what they've sent prior to today and still stands by this. I'd say I'd vote on this with the idea that they can be amended at final plan based on discussion between the applicant and staff. So the applicant seeking to change the details today and then work on a negotiation after, I'd say let's keep what we've got today and work on that negotiation after. And there is an ability to tweak, to clarify for final plan. That's my guidance to the board.
What, did you say you got stuff today that changes the plans that we have?
Yeah, the applicant provided an email today with their own preferred language on the conditions of approval to replace what we've got. That email arrived about 4 hours before the meeting.
Okay, but not a change in the plan per se.
Not changing the plan, just changing the conditions of approval as it relates to all of the town engineer related comments that the town engineer had reviewed, had discussion, and felt that they should stand where they are, with the one exception that I read earlier about their comment number 5. That was the one thing where the town engineer did acknowledge, hey, here's where I want to add some better clarity on this one heading into the meeting.
I'm happy to put the emails in as an exhibit. I don't think it's necessary, but I just want to respond to the assertion that these long conditions came out of left field. What we did was, we've been trying to resolve this. We put in from the emails from the town planner his conditions based on our email exchange. We didn't just make up a bunch of new conditions. So we tried to work with the correspondence back and forth, said, hey, let us know if this is correct understanding to the town planner. Do you want any tweaks? And we just got an email back saying we're not, from the planner saying we don't let the applicant make any changes. That's where we are. We're willing to work with the town engineer. An approval as the conditions stand would just mean an appeal. So I don't, with this understanding that they could be changed later. I mean, this is on title, it's a recorded document. They could not be changed later too. So I just think we're winding ourselves in circles for something that we can do later on. And if we can't, we're back here.
With the email, the suggested language that came in today, or whenever it was that to clarify 5B, 8, and 9? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, there was nothing additional.
No.
There were other discussions that aren't captured here.
So these are, just to give you an
Okay. Kind of as our solicitor said, our engineer's not here. Those came in today. We really can't accept those and.
And I'm not asking you to, and that's why I offered the condition I offered, because he's not here and we can have our engineer here and then you guys are responding to technical items. Again, these are building permit level conditions, and like your solicitor said, the door is not closed, on these.
I think after hearing from your engineer, I think that they're pretty close.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to,
think so
I don't
too.
want to be a referee here.
Right.
I think the board wants to.
No, and the biggest concern is the statements like, well, the intent, that wasn't the intent of that language. We're getting into real tough territory where, okay, that wasn't the intent, and then I gotta pull the planning board at minute 45 to say, well, that wasn't the intent, and then we're in a fight about what the intent was, and it's just better for everybody to clean it up. So,
Okay, is the board okay? Can I go into the public hearing?
I'm good with public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Good? Okay, I don't have to reopen it. We never closed it. So is anybody in the public, let's start on this side, want to come up? Anybody from the homeowners association like to come up? No? Anybody on this side of the room? Seeing none? Anybody on Zoom? Raise their hand. Okay, I'll make a motion to close public hearing. I have a motion, I have a second. I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is now closed.
Are we at the point where, motion, any other questions?
I'm just gonna, anybody on the board have any other questions? I think we're really beating this with a stick tonight. Listening to my solicitor, I think we're bound by regulations that existed back then. You know, I don't want to say how I feel right now before we vote, but, I think we can
So
pose a motion.
if that's the case, I just want some clarity because, short of asking the planning, staff if they objected to removing the conditions of approval 1 and 2, it sounds like the age restriction and the bedroom restriction, they're kind of, we vetted those and I don't know if you want to pull the board on.
I'm comfortable myself.
Well, I don't know if you want to pull anyone
I
else.
think we heard from our solicitor and.
Okay.
There's the
I don't-
opinion.
Yeah, the 55 part I got, but I wasn't sure about the number of bedrooms. I guess if none of the others were restricted.
If anybody on the board has anything to say, they certainly can. I'm comfortable myself with it.
And then, so that only leaves the outstanding issue of the language in the conditions for 5B, 8, and 9.
I think if we approve this with a condition that you sit down and work this out, you don't want us to approve it with the conditions. I understand that.
But I also am sensitive to the end.
I am too, but,
Okay.
all right, I'll entertain a motion on this project.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plan, owner applicant D2 Homes, the address of the property Dante Boulevard. This is a portion of Assessors Plat 13, Lot 22, in the BP zoned lot size currently consisting of approximately 13.6 acres. The proposed use is single-family style dwelling units, with the applicant proposing to develop 66 detached, single-family condominium units on a vacant portion of the subject parcel, along with the internal roadways and associated site amenities. Public water and sewer connections are anticipated. The preliminary plan approval comes with, well, I'd like to incorporate the staff report into my motion, and the conditions of approval will be as written in the report, but I'm just going to go through them. Number 3, the applicant shall install either picket fences or hedges around the perimeters of the existing drainage basins will abut the proposed development. Where the picket fences or hedges are chosen, the selected treatment shall match the style of the picket fences and/or hedges already in place around the other basins in the developed portions of the Highlands at Hopkins Hill. The applicant shall provide an approval letter from the Hopkins Hill Fire District with its final plan application. The applicant shall submit a revised plan set with its final plan application containing a selected means of securing perimeters of the drainage basins, either picket fences or hedges, and they'll be shown and shall be shown on the landscaping plan sheet. Evidence or requested state and local permits shall be submitted with the final plan application. Applicant shall submit all legal documents with the final plan application, including condominium documents if the applicant elects to create a new condominium association rather than to join the existing Highlands at Hopkins Hill Condominium Association. Then such documentation shall be brought before the Planning Commission as part of the final plan application for review in front of the commission. Otherwise, I'm going to strike this sentence about the final plan administratively. And then there are items in this report numerated as 5B, referring to comments by the town engineer for sheet 3 of 14 that were described in an email to staff on 5/19, and then items 8 and 9, which refer to the conditions for a certificate of conformance and the requirements of the applicant. In those instances, the applicant will work with the planning staff, including the town engineer, to come to an agreement on how to address the process for certificates of conformance and certificates of occupancy, and return or work those out, or else come back to us for final plan approval. If they are able to reach an agreement, they can proceed administratively. And I think that's it.
I have a motion.
I just didn't read them.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Doug has. Do you have a question?
You want to grab John? It's. Oh, yeah, wonderful. I wasn't on the board yet.
I zipped this for you because I could have went.
Okay, next on our agenda is a public informational meeting. We will take comment on this. Jefferson Pines pre-application major land development comprehensive permit, Beach Buds LLC. Applicant LaCroix Holdings LLC, AP 28 lots 40.3, 40.6, Zone General Business, 4987 Jefferson Drive. Applicant proposes construction 16,000 square foot two-story building containing 32 residential units on approximately 1.5 acres of land as a comprehensive permit, the resulting density of 20.8 units per acre. A minimum of 25% proposed units will be restricted as affordable. Anybody here representing the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order, this is just a pre-app.
Yes.
I thought you said public informational hearing.
Well, that's what it says on the agenda. We've been told we have to take comment on the pre-app, so I'm just going by the agenda.
Just to clarify, I think it's a public informational meeting.
That's what I said.
Okay, then, yeah, we're all on the same page.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
These waters are already muddy.
Oh, this ought to be a little less technical since it's a pre-app. Thomas Cronin, Don Brown, Cronin Farrar, 1070 Main Street, Coventry. Here for the Jefferson Pines comp permit. Mr. Flynn's introductions get longer and longer, but I overlap with him a little bit. So we have 4 lots on Jefferson Drive, 40.3, 40.4, 40.5, and 40.6. Currently wooded vacant land, zone general business. This lot is the boundary between general business and R20. So at the southern line of this lot, general business ends, R20 begins. That's one of the things that makes it a good spot for the project that we're proposing. So just by way of orientation, coming off Tioga Avenue from the light at Jelina's, this area is one lot up on the right after Patuxent Valley Medical. It's right across from the warehouse, across the street. So it's immediately north of the parking lot of that medical building, and then immediately across the street from what used to be Coventry Lumber and their lumberyard. It was a pipe company. I went by today. There's no sign on the building anymore. I'm not exactly sure. Neptune. Yeah, they took the sign down maybe when they painted. But anyway, I think, yeah. So to the south is a single-family home in the R20 zone. The beginning of Colonial Acres Plat. There's a lot of very nice single-family homes starting there and continuing up into that neighborhood to the south. And then immediately to the west is the Glenwood Park mixed-use apartment and office development. So that's the orientation, as I mentioned, currently vacant. So this is a comprehensive permit application. The proposal is to merge the 4 lots into a single lot of just over 1.5 acres, to construct a single apartment building on the southern portion of the lot. The building would be 2 stories, 100 by 160 feet, 16,000 square foot footprint. 4 one-bedroom apartments on the first floor, 4 one-bedroom apartments on the second floor, 12 two-bedroom apartments on the first floor, 12 two-bedroom apartments on the second floor, 32 total apartments. I still think I'm going over the same information in Mr. Flynn's introduction. So of those units, 25% will be affordable units, and we've contacted Coventry Housing Authority, Julie Letty, to be the oversight for that portion, as is done in many projects before you. So I talked about this being a good spot in town for this project. And if we go back to the valuations of comprehensive permits before the most recent change in the statute, I'd be talking about this spot ticking off all those boxes, right? There's public water, there's public sewer, there's a traffic control, there's public transportation available, there are no wetlands on this site. It's a good spot for a comprehensive permit, affordable housing apartment. The access will be 2 entrances on Jefferson Drive. We've we've provided for 69 parking spaces in the center of the combined lot. If you looked at the site plan, you'd see that the apartment building is on the southernmost portion of the lot, closest to where the homes are, so that the residential matches the residential. We took the parking area and stuck it in the middle so it wouldn't interfere, with lights and noises and things with the residents of those single-family homes. And then preserved the northern portion of the lot for the drainage, for the stormwater. There's an area subject to flooding, that's the technical term, on that northern portion of the lot. So we'll corral that and use that for our drainage as well. There's quite a bit of impervious surface on Glenwood Park, which has historically drained into this lot, and we have to, we have to live with that. So that's how it's kind of segmented into thirds. The southernmost portion against the single-family home residential will be where this residential apartment building will be, parking in the middle, and then the area to handle a stormwater to the north towards that Patuxent Valley Medical Building. We provided 69 parking spaces, 2 units, 2 spots per unit, and a couple of visitors spaces. And I'll be circling back to that because one of the variances that we're asking for is for lot coverage. So, those parking numbers are tied to that lot coverage request. So in planning the project ourselves, we really thought that adequate parking would be a key element for the neighborhood for this project. So that everybody who lived in this building, maybe plus some, had some place to park, as opposed to parking on the street or across the street in that, Pike Building or in the Patuxent Valley parking lot. We thought adequate parking was an important thing, so I'll come back to that on that waiver request. The parking lot has the required down lighting and landscaping, pursuant to the code. And the three, getting into the variance, there's 3 variances that I'll ask for from the planning board because this is a comprehensive permit. You get to decide everything. So the first one is that this is a multifamily development. As this board has heard me repeat over and over again, there's no multifamily allowed anywhere in any zone in the town of Coventry. So that's a variance in every multifamily project, whether it's an apartment building or a condo or really anything else that has more than one house on one lot. So I'm asking for a variance for that to be allowed. I'm asking for a rear setback variance, dimensional variance. So if you looked at the plans, the building is on the southern portion of the lot, closest to the single-family home. The rear of the building is next to or adjacent to that Glenwood Park parking lot. And in that area, we have one corner of the building, which is 24 feet 9 inches from the line, and then one corner that's 16.4 inches from the line, and 30 feet is required there. So we're asking for that relief from the board. And then the last one is the lot coverage that I mentioned. So 2 spots per unit is what the town of Coventry regulations require. For many of these denser projects, we've gone down to 1.5 spots per unit. And the state law requires only 1 spot per unit. So really, we'd be asking the board for their impression as to, whether the variance weighs heavier or the number of parking spots is more attractive. So that's one of the responses that we're looking for to get from the board at this pre-application. So the proposed building is more than 40 feet from the adjacent residential home, as is required. Anytime you build on those zone lines, you have to measure building to building. And in this case, 40 feet is required. And we have an excess of the 40 feet on the plan. We had a TRC meeting. That went pretty well as far as Public Works, they were concerned about the lot coverage and the ability to corral that area subject to flooding. And police requested a traffic study at, at the public hearing stage, which, is fine. That's a fine requirement. And fire wanted to make sure that that parking lot and that building itself were adequately lit. We talked to Chief Katie today, and he wants some lighting in that parking lot. So that TRC was generally favorable. So the question that was most unsettled at TRC was the density of this project. So you heard right in the introduction, the way that the agenda was written, it's even in bold in the agenda. The staff has concerns regarding the density of this project. I, on the other hand, completely disagree with the way they have calculated the density of this project. But what I don't want to do is get into some kind of, calculus ball here with the board about what number is the correct number, because the state law is clear that as long as it fits the affordable housing plan, it's up to this board to decide whether it's a project with whatever number of units for whatever acreage is available, fits into the community, doesn't hinder public safety, and all those usual standards that we use. So I'm interested to hear what the board thinks, more than I am arguing about how to interpret the state statute. I will point out a couple of just comparables. You'll note in the staff report that they have Glenwood Park has 60 residential units and a few things that they call office buildings. A couple of them look like garages to me. I don't really know. I was sneaking around in there today. So, and they have about a little more than 13 units per acre density. Anthony Mill has 122 units on 4 acres. They have 30.5 units per acre. Harris Mill has 157 units on 4.29 acres. That's 36.6 units per acre. It's kind of difficult. There's not a lot of apartment buildings in Coventry to compare apples to apples. So between Glenwood Park and the Mills, it seems like the closest comparison. So that's the presentation. Pat Walker from Walker Engineering is here with me, and Jason LaCroix from the applicant is here with me. If you have any further questions, I can consult with them, or they can testify on their own. But that's the pre-application presentation. Thanks.
Okay, well, I have a concern with the density, because even if it was R20, you get two units per acre with a 5-unit bonus. So that brings you to 7 units per acre on an R20. I can't see 32 units. Some of those things you mentioned, maybe it was before zoning. Some of those projects, Glenwood, probably before zoning was even active. But we've been pretty consistent on the state law on affordable, that, R27 per acre, and, general business is basically 5. You lose the 2. Staff has really outlined it perfectly in their report.
Well, I would strongly disagree with that. I think it's legally impossible to start with 0 on any piece of land for a comprehensive permit. So, but like I said, I don't want to get into that. You can't say that and me not say I disagree with that.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
be consistent. This is what we've been doing as far as a comprehensive permit.
I think that's dangerous to even say for the board, to say that the state law gives you complete discretion to find as many units as you think would fit the affordable housing plan in the community, and to say that each and every time you stuck to the absolute minimum allowed by law. That seems like a dangerous
I don't
position.
want to put words in my mouth. But what
Well,
I'm
that's,
saying is
yes.
that I'm just going by what the regulations say. And I think this board can make the decision on the density.
Absolutely.
That's pretty
Yes,
clear.
absolutely.
State law states.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Clooney.
First of all, I just want to clarify something because I think when you were doing your remarks at the beginning, you talked about the 25% of affordable and then said 16, right? 16 affordable units.
8. 25% of 32.
16 would be half.
Oh, that's right. Why am I thinking 64? I kept thinking there was 64. Okay. Yeah, that would be.
They can do 50%
Okay,
of.
so again, I looked at the plan. I'm usually, pretty liberal with, housing units because I think they, to some degree, support economic development and help fill storefronts. However, my concern with this project, at least looking on the face of it, is the setbacks from the abutting property to the rear, a two-story apartment building. And a couple of things on shown, they have a shed, they have a fenced yard in the back. So, I mean, they're 10 feet from the property line. I'm actually surprised that the fire marshal didn't make a remark about accessibility to all sides of the building. There's a pinch point in the back of 16 feet from the parking lot. And then, of course, the front drive's accessible. And then you've got that narrow strip down the back between the building and the neighbor's fence if there was ever an incident. So again, I don't know if there's a better layout. I don't know if there's a way to make the building smaller, just to make it fit better. I know those zones are tough when you got general business right up against residential. There's really no buffer, so to speak. We run into that all the time. We had the same issue down at the cornfield. I think before that became residential, there was talk of big box stores that were going to be literally right in folks' backyards. So without getting into a match over the number of units in total, I don't know if there's a different way, and I understand now that you explained it, that you left the stormwater area up there because it's already naturally wet, but I don't know if there's a way to split the parking, put the building in the middle, reorient it. I mean, if there was going to be a strip like that and I'm assuming that's the entrance to the building from the parking lot. And then
Yes.
I don't know if there's any rear entrances or other fire exits on the back of the building for egress, but it would all, at least, and again, it may not get you what you want in terms of units and layout, but I would rather see that short space to the rear of the building up against the Glenwood Park than with parking on both sides of the building. So I just don't know. Without getting into, again, the number of units and see what you could come up with.
I don't think that having the building face Jefferson is an obstacle we cannot overcome. I mean, I think,
Well, I think what'll happen is you may find out that as you stop moving it around, it's like, oh, I can't get the parking to fit. Well, now I can't get my number of units, but, and just a comment, because I lived there for a short period, you forgot Pilgrim Park on Pilgrim Ave. That's another apartment complex with two stories. The other ones that you were comparing it to.
they have about 12 units per acre.
I wasn't trying to, I just thought, but I thought what was interesting is when you got into the mill conversion, some of those are 3 floors. I mean, they were pre-existing buildings, so we didn't have much say on those. And as Ron indicated, I think Glenwood Park probably predated, as Pilgrim Park probably did. So we have to kind of deal with the regulations that are here. So, but that was my concern. I think the setbacks are a little tight. I think it's a little unfair for that lot in the back to be looking at a 2-story building 10 feet from their property. Glenwood Park might be more suitable. I realize there's that large building across the street. I also like was there a variance for landscape too on this? Because we talked, is there any landscaping going in other than?
There's some, in the parking area, there's landscaping.
I did notice that one thing I did see across the street, at least they got that row of arborvitaes between the street, sidewalk and the building to provide some screening. So again, I don't know what the facade of this building's gonna look like, but that's why I was saying I didn't know if there was a better way to reorientate it. Basically, that's what you got. You got the sidewalk, then you got the small strip, you got the building, you got a 16-foot pinch point in the back and 10 feet all the way down that side property line. And you're gonna have people up on the second floor that are gonna be staring right into their backyard.
So, Mr. Clooney, I had, my first look at this plan had the exact same impression as you as to fire access. Reviewed it specifically with Chief Cady, and he was okay with it. So I mean, I share your perception, like that doesn't look right. So
Aesthetics.
I don't, I don't, I mean, the building could obviously be moved to the middle. We thought it advantageous to not have the parking, adjacent to the single-family homes. We're trying to be respectful of those folks. So, but if you think that the building is more obnoxious.
I didn't
than
say
the-
you could go right up to the property line with the parking lot. You might have to put a buffer in there,
Well,
landscape.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I would anticipate putting up some kind of visual screen or landscape buffer, but that was our thought anyway, was that the opening and closing of car doors and headlights were more obnoxious than, the side of a brand-new apartment building. So, we could look at it a different way, that's fine if that's the feedback from the board. So, yeah, that's totally fine.
Anybody else have any questions on the board?
Just always look out for the butter.
Yeah. In other words, if you reduce the envelope of the building and made it smaller, you wouldn't have to need the variance on the setbacks,
So the
number of units.
So it's the rear setbacks to Glenwood Park are an issue, or? 30 feet, I'm asking for 14 feet of relief, yes. To the that's the closest point. So yeah, okay. Yeah. That's why I'm here. To
My
learn.
main concern is density. That's, anybody else on the board have any?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Tom, I mean, kind of same comments that, you heard a moment ago, is it's kind of close to that, property line on the south side. And when you have a second floor unit, I mean, if those people put a pool or something in their backyard, people on the second floor are really intrusive, looking right down in it. It would be nicer if the building was a little smaller and kind of in the center of the lot. So it wouldn't be so intrusive on the residential unit there. I mean, you got a business on the other end with the PV emergency room. The setback of Chief Katie's all right with it on the, between there and Glenwood. It's a little wood line there, and that's their driveway anyway. But we'll get a little narrower. So that's the biggest thing, is reduce the density a little bit and try to get it away from the neighbors. Give a little more space around the back. And definitely got to do some landscaping when we get to that point.
When you say landscaping, Mr. Smith, you're speaking of also that
Buffer,
visual screening.
visual screen.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're talking about this.
Growing, yep, between the residential, that one residential piece of property, to give them some privacy, instead of looking up at their backyard and looking at someone's second floor apartment, vice versa. They've been there, that house has been there probably since the 70s,
You sure?
so give them some privacy. That's it.
Yeah, as Mr. Clooney mentioned, that, they have other things in the yard, a shed, and maybe something else, in the yard as well, closer than the house too, so I understand what you're saying.
And with the drainage part, I'm familiar with that area, with the drainage, it's very, very wet there.
Yeah, I know Glenwood Park's been, dumping a lot of water on us.
There's a
We've
drain-
corrected some of that
There's-
already.
There's a drain pipe that runs from the pond on the other side of the old Benson Neptune building across that parking lot that ties in with the drainage that crosses Route 3 and goes behind St. John and Paul's Church. Most of that belongs to RIDOT, and it commonly, in a heavy rainstorm, it overtops. So there are water issues
Yeah, for sure.
right in that area.
Yeah. And we'll do our best, this board is well familiar with the DEM standards, and, we'll of course meet those and try to do a little better, right? Because it's a problem.
Yeah, Huron Pond is back there and it overtops.
Yeah.
That way.
Sure. So, we're trying to build a nice project. We don't want to have even, floods in the street or even in our parking lot. We're aware of that. Issue in this partly why the land's never been developed. I mean, it's tough. It's common, right? The last lot in an area that gets built becomes like everyone's overfill, that's just, so, all right, so, I guess what I'm hearing is that the board would be comfortable, with, no more than, 7.7 units or some variation of that. I guess we'll probably have to round up because we're doing affordable, right? I have to go to 8, and have 2, affordable, and, I think that's probably be the end of this particular project. So, it's nice to see you, and, we'll be back.
Excuse me. Well, I saw the solicitor looking at the plan. I don't know. Can we put the next sheet on the board for the public? Someone might be watching on Zoom. That's not the site. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Mr. Price, go ahead.
I'm just looking at the layout of the building, and I know the back is 30 feet. But really, for the way he has it laid out, it's more like a side yard to me. And really, the backyard is the abutter to the south, the way this is laid out. So I would rather give more variance closer to the parking lot if we can get more space between the neighbors, the residents.
So, Mr. Price, I just want to make sure I confirm so if we gave
That's my personal.
the 30-foot buffer to the south, to the residential home, and crunch the building up a bit, that'd be,
I would prefer that because the way I look at it is, I don't care how close you get to the commercial parking lot. What I think that the intent is that the residential property get the larger buffer in this case. And that's just the way it appears to me with the layout of this lot. I know theoretically you have the street frontage and left and right of the building. But it just appears the way it's laid out to me that it really should be the opposite. The 30 feet should be, which is the side yard, I understand that, but that really should be closer to the residential property. And I'd rather give the variance like up to 10 feet on that side yard to the parking lot on the commercial side.
Right.
And I think that might help out with
You
your,
shrunk the footprint of the building, less units. I think that would achieve that.
might achieve it too.
That's my.
But I mean, I'd rather give you the variance down to 10 feet on the side yard.
I understand, right.
And see that.
This footprint that's in front of us.
yeah, so if we took Mr. Anderson's and Mr. Price's ideas and kind of merged them together, we'd be making this building go from a rectangle maybe into more of a square. And we'd be pushing it to the north or to the right as you look at it here. And obviously that would reduce the number of units by whatever square footage. But if the applicant was able to give you a substantial setback to the south to that residential home with some visual screening, get the building out of I guess right now it's the rear setback. Mr. Price was referring to it as a side setback, but get the building out of that area so that we don't need dimensional variances and the building is removed from the residential home. I guess would the board consider an apartment building that fit within those parameters? Just reducing the size of the building is also going to reduce the number of parking spaces required as well, just automatically. So the parking area would shrink as well. And we might end up losing, it's hard to estimate, but, a substantial, The hard part with affordable housing is you pretty much try to stick to those multiples of 4, so you can take the 25% off and it makes sense. You know, you can figure out how much money you can spend on those affordable units if you do the math, right? So I'm always thinking in multiples of 4. It's not necessary, right? Uh, It's just difficult. The math is difficult. So every affordable unit, right, the developer is shooting to build for neutral, net zero. They're going to spend all that money, they're going to put in that unit, and they're just trying like hell not to lose money. So there's 8 units in this building that I'm showing you today where they're not going to gain. So that there's plenty of other units where they're going to gain and the project works. But so if you start like saying, well, we'll round up one here, it's a double negative economically, right? You lose the market rate unit and you have another one where if you're lucky, you're net zero. So the economics of the project are affected. And that's why we just think in these units of 4 when we're thinking about affordable houses. So I guess my question to the board is if I can move it north or to the right, get it out of any setback, ask for no dimensional variances, reduce the number of parking spots, which will also reduce the lot coverage. Probably won't need a variance for that because I'm pretty close right now. You know, if I was still at, you know, some number like 20 or 24 units, would the board still think that I'm way over in density? I guess that's the question. That's the takeaway question.
Can I ask staff on, because we're reading their report.
Sure.
They're pretty set densities on their staff report. So I want to hear from staff.
Sure.
And, you know, also, I'll hear from my solicitor on something that would be precedent setting. I'd be concerned that everybody in town be buying an acre and a half of land and putting 32 units on it. So I'm going to hear from staff first, and I'm going to hear from our solicitor second.
Sure. So staff is familiar with the state law on this issue. The state law on the issue does provide the statement that if you're giving us 25% affordable housing, then you remove any areas that are undevelopable, and then you work with that amount of land. And then the calculation, and the applicant's purporting they've got 1.52, so about an acre and a half of developable land. And that probably needs a revisit because I know there's an area of the site that's an area subject to flow, you know, basically like a wetland light, if you will. But the state law states 25% affordable gets you 5 units per acre as a bonus on top of what underlying zoning allows. Underlying zoning does not allow residential here. So we do interpret that means that underlying zoning gives you 0. The applicant has briefly mentioned they think that that's an impossible standard or that that's not a legal standard. I'd be interested to hear where that basis is if they think that they've earned a greater. But let's work from the understanding that 5 units per acre is on top of 0. That allows for 7.7 units. I think that that's a barometer for your review to consider when you look at it. There's nothing that stops this board from adding additional density on top of that. But you have to understand the state law provides then a scale for how density should go up when you provide more affordables. If you give us 50% affordable, you get 9 units per acre. On this site, that would be about 13 to 14 units. If you give us a 100% affordable project, which we do get, I mean, generally those are more publicly funded, but we do get those projects. Then you've got 12 units per acre. On this site, that would be 18 to 19 units. So if this applicant gave us 100% affordable, they'd be entitled in state law to 18 to 19 units, and they're asking for 32. We just think that that's a good barometer for your understanding of the review. We don't mind housing. We especially like affordable housing, but I think where the applicant's looking for density, I think we should be looking at where's the additional benefit or additional affordable to compensate for that density.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, 12 unit per acre if it's 100% affordable on an acre and a half, a little more than an acre and a half, you're talking about 18 or 19 total units. So 18, 19 total units, if 100% affordable, they're asking for 32. We just think that those are good numbers for you to keep in mind in terms of the state laws establishing how someone would go up the ladder of density, and the state law establishes you get to go up the ladder when you provide more affordable. That's worth noting.
Could I just clarify? Because I mean, and that's of the assumption though that it's zone general business, which it is.
It is zone general business.
But it's a stretch because I mean, those lots were cut out to be residential lots at some point, and I'm not convinced that it may be suitable for some businesses, but not for others. So I just, what I'm asking is hypothetically speaking, if it was zoned R20,
Yes.
which is what the zone to the rear is,
Yep.
what would the calculation be then?
So then your underlying zoning gives you 2 units per acre. So all these numbers we're talking about, the staff, if this was zoned R20, staff would be saying that their minimum allowed density would be 9.7 units total.
Instead of 7.7,
Correct.
2 units.
Actually, let me think, it would.
There's
we
4
would
lots.
say 7, we would say 7 units per acre. And let me think, I'd actually, on an acre and a half, I would have to do some math, but 7 times 1.5, you're probably actually like 9 to 10. You're at like 9.5, I think.
There you go.
I'd have to, you're somewhere around, like, if this had underlying zoning of R20, and I frankly, and it's not a policy statement, I don't mind when it's a general business zone to have some consideration of additional density, almost as if, let's say it was an R20. I don't mind that kind of consideration, but we'd be then talking about a total number of units in and around 10, and they're still looking for 32. So there's still a pretty big difference between, even if this was zoned residential on R20, our R20 is our densest residential zone, we'd be talking about 10 units. That's with their bonus. That's a comp permit. If this was zoned R20, our densest residential zone, you add the 5 unit per acre on top of 2 unit, you got 7 units per acre. So you're multiplying 7 by 1.5. You end up with, actually, it's like 10.5.
And that's what I had stated. Because it's surrounded by R20, if we looked at it as an R20,
Sure.
you would get 7 per acre.
That's correct.
So you're looking like 10 for the total.
Yeah.
They're at 32.
Yeah.
And as I said to the solicitor, precedent setting too. I mean, everybody in the town buy an acre and a half and put 32 units. That's, to me, is crazy. I just can't wrap my hands around that density.
These are
In
going
my opinion, as one on this board.
and these are all rentals too, right? They're all going to be rentals.
That's correct.
Is okay. 'Cause there's a shortage of rental housing in town, so I kind of affordable being understand. I get what Doug's saying. If there was a more affordable component, it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank, I think that it's worth the board's discussion. I don't think that any one decision necessarily sets a firm legal precedent for another, but the board is filled with human beings that try to be fair and provide sort of an equal template to development. I think you're allowed to take the context of this area into account. You're allowed to take the context that this is a business zone parcel. You're allowed to take the context that the neighbor to the west would be an apartment complex that, that there's some structures there. And, you're also allowed to take into a context that a butter to the south and the fact that the neighborhood to the south is single family. But you take all of that into context and maybe you do have a discussion around what additional density is appropriate. I still think there's a barometer for your review of, considering some increases as you see fit, but being thoughtful on what's the appropriate scale. So, and I think the applicant has a decent approach here of kind of trying to sort out, maybe it is a good use of this pre-app. Is there a number? Is it, I know the applicant's talking about 4, and I totally understand that, but they're throwing out he mentioned 20 to 24 units. Is there a number that the applicant could come back with and know that they're designing a plan where there's an appropriate density that the board would be comfortable with? Maybe that's valuable in this pre-app to talk about a general range of number.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
two more things. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify one thing because we were going over what the feedback was, and I agree with your discussion, both what Mr. Price and Mr. Anderson said about the building, but I just want to make sure it wasn't just about the variances to the south of the building, but also the screening. So in other words, if you shift the building away, the bigger issue is to make sure that there's a nice buffer or screening or something so that there's compatibility and the homeowners next door don't feel like they're being, intruded on, especially if there's a density bonus. Because right now, they thought they were, at worst, maybe living next to a single-family house or a small business that was going to have a buffer. That's just a comment. The other thing, on these affordable housing, the restriction is only based on bedrooms, correct? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. That's how they calculate the.
No, on affordable housing, we're talking about units, and you can't restrict the number of bedrooms in a comprehensive permit. There's actually.
No, that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is when Rhode Island Housing or whoever it is sets the rent per month, it's based on the number of bedrooms that are in the unit.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and
The reason I'm bringing that up is because, again, we're talking about building footprints and how many units and the number of affordable units in the building, and then what's that going to cost the developer in relation to the rent he's going to receive. And I'm just throwing this out as food for thought. We approved a project that is really coming along nicely on Fairview Avenue, the church conversion.
Yep.
I don't know how many units are in there, but those units ranged, I think, from 500 to 800 square feet. And he's going to get some rents. He designed those for a different market. There's no full kitchen in there. There's like a kitchenette. And it's big enough. They got the tech stuff, the internet, all that stuff. So I'm just throwing that out to you because there might be a happy medium there where you could raise the number of affordable units that are going into this building rather than 1,000 or 900 square feet per unit, and still make it profitable. Just throw it out.
I do think that I know that we are required by state law to what they would call intersperse these units. And that would include the type of unit. So if we have 1 bedrooms, we have to have 1 bedroom affordables. If we have 2 bedrooms, we have to have 2 bedroom affordables. So I understand your point economically, but we can't take it to an extreme because they have to fit into the flow of the development.
I wasn't suggesting that you try to, pick and choose.
Yeah.
What I was saying is you could make them all smaller to begin with and still maybe get enough rent because I think, there becomes a number for 500 square feet to 800 square feet. It's not until you get up into the much larger numbers that you start seeing rent increases. So a 1-bedroom unit that is 500 or 600 square feet versus the rent you would receive for a 900 square foot unit might not be that much difference. So
It's an interesting comment, Mr. Clooney, but it would also, ironically increase the density of the building.
Yeah. And I think.
no.
Yeah,
No.
if we would decrease the size and keep the same number of units, it's still 32 units or 24 units, or, you know what I mean? The footprint of the building is
You
smaller.
could make them, you could do 100% affordable,
Oh.
50. And
We're not Coventry Housing. They're the only ones that can do 100%
And I
affordable.
think an existing building set up, as Mr. Clooney had said, was a reuse. This is a new building. If the
I'm just giving you examples from
development-
around town.
the factory across the street, the factory or the piping went into a reuse and made affordable in there, it'd be two different animals, so to speak.
They're literally, well,
Construction,
at least I couldn't find a single building, apartment building in the town of Coventry to compare it to. They're like Glenwood Park, or Pilgrim Park, like they're 3, 4 buildings, 3 floors, 12 units in each. That's what people built in Coventry. So, my only direct comparables were the mills because it's in 1 unit, 1 building.
I think my concern, and I don't want to repeat myself, with this type of density, you'll be seeing a lot of them popping up everywhere. That's my concern.
I don't think, public water, public sewer, public transportation, no wetlands. This thing's a unicorn. why I'm saying that, because
Yeah.
that's so. No. Okay.
Solicitor, do you have some input on that?
Well, I think the planner addressed it. The minimums obviously are just minimums in the statute, not maximums. And two, no matter how the board were to vote, you're not creating a precedent because the applicant has the burden of demonstrating the unique nature of the conditions of that property that make it, engineering, sufficient protection, yes. And in this particular case, is it surrounded by three sides of commercial or two?
3 sides of commercial.
Three sides commercial, so that's,
Well, one's Glenwood Park, mixed use.
those are things that make it unusual, right? And that's why you can be very project specific. So the board has essentially, the applicant has a clear palette, and you have a clear palette.
Right.
And the only thing that you could not say no to is the minimum. If they were to provide you a minimum application and you were to say no, it would be an automatic, reversal. Now, between the minimum and 32, depending on the case the applicant the better his case, the more difficult it is for the board to say no under state law.
Right, and that's why I brought that up. If
Does that make sense?
surrounding in an R20, if we went to the R20 zone, it
Right.
wouldn't be anywhere near 32 on the minimum. I mean, I think the board can put in whatever number they want. But I'm just concerned on the density, in that area.
I think all the.
No,
board- I
we
think
didn't
the
hear from
board-
the public yet,
Right,
but I'm
but
sure.
I think the board has really focused in on the issues that are adequate to, are definitely relevant to determining how you want density reduced from the applicant's request. You're not saying it just because you don't want density, just because you don't want affordable, right? You're saying it because you have concerns about the neighbors, you have concerns about the setback. These are all valid concerns. And I think as long as the board keeps discussion in that realm, work with Mr.
And the pre-application is the venue to do that.
Mr. Cronin can maybe present that evidence. And there may be some economic evidence that he wants to present. I know they normally present an economic package to Rhode Island Housing,
Yeah, so, I mean,
just certificate of your letter of eligibility.
right. So we're just really at pre-application and, given the initial reaction of staff, we certainly didn't, expend any more money, right? So we have to be realistic, right? Face the issues presented, get an answer from this board, and if it's 8 units, it's 8 units, right? But
No, but if we looked at it as an.
Yeah.
That would be 4 out of the 60. But that would be half of what they're requesting.
that's not the state law. No, there's, yeah, so at each level of your contribution of affordable units, the minimum number required by statute increases. So you could give me 100 units at 25%. The minimum is 5. There is no upper end. And if I went up to 50%, the minimum is 9. You can't go below 9. You should still give me 100. Right? So it's just a ladder, but each one of those is just a minimum. And that's to entice the developer to build so that you get more without saying, people saying no. So, yeah, so that's the,
Staff want to jump in at all?
I mean,
Be comfortable on that, seeing where it's going?
honestly, it's a policy choice on behalf of the board. I can only give you just my input.
And
But
I mean, the applicant's asking for double.
I do think that this is a valuable use of a pre-app. The applicant had a certain number, but the idea is that from the applicant's perspective, one, it's worth knowing, is the applicant really just at 25%? And then if they're not getting public funding, there's an understandable reason why they would say, I'm just at 25%. Let's stick with that. And if that's where the applicant is, I think it's valuable for them to know if they came back with a certain number, what's the appetite of the commission? And that way the applicant walks away knowing, am I coming back is it worth my time to keep investing in designing this project or not? I don't want to make a set, but, number of, staff feel comfortable with this, that, the other. And I actually think the solicitor brought up really good points, which is, if we were in a position where we thought this is too dense, we don't deny it just because on a vacuum of a numeric number of density. We deny it because there's impacts that the density creates, and we want to monitor those impacts. So I do think if someone gave us 16 units instead of 32, there'd be a big difference in impacts. We might be reducing the building height to 1 story. We certainly gaining a lot more space and flexibility in the site design to get a little farther away from that single family dwelling. We'd kind of want to stay within that realm of what are the impacts that this is providing? How would we reduce that? And is there a number? And I don't think that that's a terrible number. But I think it gives the applicant guidance. That's where the conversation should be had. Yeah.
I think that I'm a little more comfortable with the 16 than the 32, I can tell you that.
this is literally.
I'm one of 9.
You literally can't go below, say, 8, just because we can't build up 0.7. And after that, it's up to you. I'm here to listen. So if you're comfortable with that, then we'll do some math, right? And maybe it'll be something else, or maybe it'll be 16,
I'm gonna let the public, we're gonna
Sure.
take comments from the public. I see public out there, so, and then you can come back up, Mr. Cronin, and.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody out in the public want to come up and speak? Come on up, please. Well, you have to come up. You have to address the board.
Okay, that's fine.
You want to sit down? You can
Wondering-
sit down with that.
Sit down with it.
I wasn't aware that we had a mobile. These are all new.
All right, what I'm worried about is water. I'm the second house over, and I do get water. Back.
Where are you located at? Your name and address, please?
101. Second house over.
And what's your name, please? Just for the record.
No, yeah.
They're concerned about the water, and we're concerned about the drain, but at pre-application, we don't have any drainage figures at this point. Obviously, if they can't do the application, if they can't get through the drains.
101 Jefferson?
Yeah, right on the
You're
corner.
next to Shirley, one house over?
The second house over. The one that's next to this property up.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to come up and speak? Name and address just for the record, please.
Curtis Hancock Drive. A couple of things, 25% minimum is what I read. It could be 100%. What's it gonna do to my property value? Second of all, I don't know if anybody's actually stayed at Jefferson, just at the corner. It's a throughway to Hopkins Hill. It's like a racetrack. You're gonna add more people cutting through, living there. Total screw up. Put 4 houses there. Designed for 4 houses? Put 4 houses. Nobody's gonna complain. You put 64, you're gonna have a problem. On top of that, the trailer parking back, got a 12-inch or so culvert that drains right through my land, my border, next door neighbor, all the way down, right through that property. And all you gotta do is look at the trees. It's a swamp. Want to play with that? With DEM, fine. Because then if DEM comes there, they gotta go to my 3 neighbors and then me and find out why the trailer park is dumping on our private property. You wanna open up that Pandora's box next? All I'm saying is I'm a capitalist. I love making money. I understand why the builder wants to make money. If you let this go, first thing I'm doing is I'm selling my house, I'm gonna buy 2 acres of land, and I'm gonna put 64 units on it. Because you set the precedent. 32, my mistake. Maybe I'll buy 2 6. You set the precedent, I'll do the same thing. You can't, it's a neighborhood. Like I said, I'm a capitalist. I believe people should make money. And I don't want to be one of the not in my backyard kind of crap, but it's not meant. You've seen the plot plan. It's up there. It's for 4 houses, not 32 low income or whatever politically correct term you want to use for that. I just think it's a mistake. I feel bad for the builder. I feel bad for the people who are working on this thing. As an engineer, I've worked on many successful and failure projects. It sucks when it doesn't work. I just don't see the benefit of this. If you want to build something like that, buy the old piping place, turn that into something. I mean, that's been desolate for the longest time. Make something there. I don't know about this Fairview thing. All I'm looking at is if you drive through the neighborhood, don't look at this crap. Drive through the neighborhood. Just drive through. Kids playing in the street, baseball park in the far corner. It's a neighborhood. It's Coventry. Why I moved here 35 years ago. Got a house in Narragansett. If I want trouble and insanity and drunks and everything and problems, I'll stay there 24/7 because there's a bunch of bars near me. But I moved to Coventry because when I wake up in the morning, I want to see the deer, the squirrels, rabbits, not 55 cars going up and down my street. That's my viewpoint, and I hate being on this whole deal here. Like I said, I feel bad for the builder. I think he picked the wrong spot. And I think he's got, you know, he's definitely going to have a problem with at least half that with water. That's a whole other thing that's got nothing to do with me. He's got to pay somebody to fix that. I'm just looking at it. Everybody here, you're all on film or whatever. I don't even attend these meetings because I have a short fuse. But the bottom line is, drive the neighborhood. Don't, oh, I was over at such and such a street and this, no. Just drive to the top of the hill. Look at the ballpark when the kids are there. You know, you got kids riding a bike in the street. Jefferson is a cut through to Hopkins Hill. Ask anybody who's on that. Ask anybody on Helen or the other side streets that lead to it. You're going to add more traffic to that? Hey, it's your choice. I mean, for me, the day this goes through and gets approved, for sale sign up out. I'll take whatever they give me. Hasta la vista, Coventry. Kentucky, and I'm out of here. You guys figure out what you're gonna do. I hate to be a jerk, but think about this. It's a residence. All I ask is you just drive through the neighborhood on a Saturday afternoon, go to the ballpark. Just see it. It's a neighborhood.
I have
It's
a
not
friend that
Providence.
lives on Monroe. I know the neighborhood very.
It's not Providence. Providence, I think Central Falls just told them to, basically stick their low-income thing. This is Coventry. World, here. Sorry, thanks.
No problem.
I'm outta here.
Appreciate your comment.
Gonna get in trouble for this one.
Never. We encourage comment from the public. Anybody else like to come up? Come on up, sir.
Would you prefer us to bring the mic to you, sir?
Your time. No problem. No problem. Appreciate coming out. Name and address for the record, please.
Ken, at 106 Jefferson Drive. Okay, I've heard about the water at the end, right at the end of this property. We have water issues where I'm at. We have actually, we've had the surveys guys go out to check and make out a bigger culvert behind 104 Jefferson Drive. Back there, that's where the pond is, and that's where things come out. And there's been a problem there for many, many years. This used to be an old sand, what do you want to call it? Gravel pit. This is what is built on that land that I'm on now. My neighbors and a few of my other neighbors around me have lost acres, not acres, but dirt. In other words, if you went in my backyard, you can see where I put a new deck 10 years ago and put the supports. The middle support is now down that far. Nothing's been done, just because of what's underneath this, the dirt underneath that's been washed out. 104, he has a culvert that was a pipe that was brought from Jefferson Drive next to 102, I guess is the number there, to the back to help drainage the water. That also has a lot of holes in it, in other words, it's being undermined. Truthfully, that road on Jefferson Drive where you go around at those big pine trees, I'm expecting them to fall. Because we do know that it was undermined back in 2002. When we had the big floods and stuff like that. It was underneath. So when you're talking what's happening with the floodplain, please don't look at this property only. That whole upper end has issues, all right? Again, does it work for these guys to try to put a building there? I'm not sure. I don't feel comfortable having to come around that bend and having a building sitting right there where he's saying that he's going to have 2 entrances, 1, 2. Well, what happens with the people that come out of Glenville, Pine? How they're going to come across? I don't care what you put for parking lots. They're going to come across and go on to Jefferson Drive. You're going to end up densitying just that area alone, just by that. And let's face it, we're all human. We're all going to take a short, easy route to come across. As far as the units are concerned, those I don't know about. I'm not a real estate person or anything. I can only tell you what I see. And I've been there for 45 years. Okay, so it's not like a new, just got there. But we do have a lot of undermining going on down that road. And the town has sent out, you call it engineers, to look at it different areas over the years. And it's not just one, it's been for a while. So just so you get a heads up, there are studies that you probably got somewhere in that computer of what hasn't been done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Anybody else have any comments? Anybody on Zoom have their hand up? Seeing none. Okay, I think it's up to us as the board to give the applicant that warm fuzzy feeling and some kind of number that we're comfortable with.
So one of the things that Doug brought up in the staff report that is a little uncertain is whether this type of project will require a master plan as of July 1st, like literally in a couple weeks, yeah. So
Going back to master plan on the.
I know that the state legislation, I believe, acted just recently, and I haven't seen the bills. I haven't seen the outcome. I'm not educated. I know the state legislation was looking to bring back the option of master plan for a comprehensive permit. Current law says there's not an option. I believe state law was looking to add the option, but that the applicant could still wish to advance right to preliminary if they wanted. I don't know where I don't know, Tom, you might be able to educate us if you know the outcome of the state legislation.
do not.
Yeah, so I believe that's where it was headed, and we could get clarity, but the applicant at the end of the day may very well, just by reviewing what's happened in the last week, learn that they've got a master plan phase back.
So there's no way, I only say that because there's no way that I'm going from this warm embrace to preliminary. So that's the only reason I brought up the master plan. I guess tell me what you think, and then we might be back for pre-application. I think I have that right to come back for pre-application.
Yeah, we would be happy to pre-app this again if you had an altered concept. I don't have any compunction against pre-apping the project multiple times as you refine it.
So some of the things are fairly straightforward and simple to accomplish, but the moving the building within the setback so that, and reducing the parking so that the only variance that's required is multifamily. I can't, there's nothing I could do about that one. I think it was you, Glenn, who said come back and ask for no variances. I can't do anything about that one. I'll still be asking for multifamily. But I can make the building fit within the setback. I can give the nearest residential neighbor some setback relief. And that will entail reducing the size of the building, the number of units and the parking spaces. But what I hear from this board is that the number that results from all those activities is probably not going to be a number that you're comfortable with. So I'm struggling a little bit with that disconnect in the comments. So I appreciate Mr. Smith, lofting the trial balloon. That's why I'm here. And if the board, thinks that, that is something that they'd be comfortable with, I'd love to hear that. So maybe we could try to design, something close to that. But otherwise, I do need to hear probably a little more information, besides getting the building out of the setback, reducing the impervious surface so there's no variance, and then giving the residential neighbor a greater setback, and all those things I can accomplish. I just don't know, if I do all those things, I don't know what the number is gonna be, and I just get this feeling that you're not gonna be happy with the number that it is. So if I had a range or something from this board that we could design to and come back, that would be of great assistance, and that's not your obligation. But I'm just asking for that.
Well, after hearing from the neighbors, I mean, I did hear one story, which if you reduce the units and could do it with one story, I think I could wrap my hands around that. I can't get my hands around 32. 16 seemed like a pretty good number with 4 affordable. Being that it's half, maybe we can reduce the height of the building to a one story. I don't know what the footprint would fit. But I'll hear from the board.
If I could just comment on that, yeah, the one story, I thought about that, but I think it's gonna add the cost and it's not gonna get us what we wanted to do in terms of the setbacks and the footprint of the building. But one other thing I think is important for the board, and usually have some of this information, that property right now, despite being 4 lots, is completely zoned general business.
That's correct, 4
The
lots,
Setback lines on general business up against that residential dwelling,
10 feet.
10 feet.
10 feet, be less.
And
This is designed for
theoretically,
general business.
whether it's a Patuxent Valley Medical Walk-in or some other facility, you could easily need 30 spaces in there. So you're still going to get people coming and going from Tyoke Avenue in and out of the neighborhood, whether they come through Hopkins Hill or whatever. See, I'm trying to weigh the impacts of the neighbors versus, and again, the mod housing.
Balance, I'm just trying to get a.
I think, well, from my perspective, it sounds like, it seemed like, Mr. Smith's number was 16 here. That might be a maximum. So, and if 8's the minimum, somewhere.
Well, the only number in the middle is 12.
Well, that's right in the middle. I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
you have to run some numbers to see what works. I mean,
Right.
you're not going to run a project that's not going to be profitable.
That would be 3 affordable.
And keep in mind too, there's always there's other factors. Again, you haven't really gotten into the environmental challenges, the stormwater runoff. I'm hearing there's a high water table over there. So all said and done, there may be some say, you know what, I don't even want to deal with that aggravation. We are better off to go closer to 8 because we can make more money. We don't have to worry about those other expenses, mitigating stormwater and pavement and surface and parking spaces. So, there's a number, but that's just me. I got to defer to the others. I don't want to pick a number.
I said what I thought about. Thinking the 16 units may have to be, or would have to be, 2 levels in order to make it work economically. And because if we just took the 32 and cut it in half, at a single level, he'd have the same footprint.
That's
Where's he gonna fit it? It won't fit. And we're trying to get him a little bit away from the neighbor on the south. So if we went with the 16, or an idea for the 16 for Mr. Cronin and his client, that it could be 2 levels and reduce the footprint, give him more area to work with, to give the neighbor more of a screening to the south, maybe some more area to work with the drainage, as we've heard, and it will be less dense, and it may be a good starting point. That's.
Sure, I mean, this board has seen many pre-applications from me, just from me, and the result is not what we expect, right? And that could be the situation here. But given the investment, we have to start somewhere and see what fits, see what's allowed by the ordinances before we get to, DEM smack us back. We don't have to deal with DOT this time, but, yeah. So, I'm not saying that even if the 32 are allowed, that I would come back at preliminary with 32. That's not the real world, right? But you have to start somewhere to design, so. I appreciate the comments, Mr. Smith.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with 16, because it's half the units, half the parking, so you're dropping from 64 with 2 by down to 32, 3 if you're handicapped, so you're like 35 parking spaces. And it is above the density we normally allow, or would like, let me change that we would like to see.
but I think it would be a fair compromise. For affordable housing, which is 25%, that's fine. The rent's comparable with the current rents in Coventry, so.
Versus what could go in a general business.
Right, if you do general business, you got 4 lots, you have 4 small general business in there.
Or one lodge if they merge the lots.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to compromise. What's a good fit? And anybody else on the board have a suggestion on? Go ahead, Mr. Price.
Sure, I think the 16 sounds like a fair number. With this lot being zoned general business, I know we had heard a lot about traffic cutting through the neighborhood. I know plenty of general businesses that would fit in a lot this size that would generate a heck of a lot more traffic than a residential building like this. So I would be in support of the 16. I think that's a nice balance between what could go here as a general business property versus this development.
Anybody else? I think we're.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing, because it wasn't really part of your opening remarks, Mr. Cronin, but for the benefit, because I know there was some discussion about the, moderate housing in this. Coventry is still under the 10%, and that's really the goal. We got to chip away at that. We're mandated to get to 10% by
Yeah.
a certain time. So we can't just ignore these projects, and when they come along, we try to find the balance and fit them in.
Yeah, so
And it's against two, like you said, we got the commercial building to one side, we got Glenwood Park, which is apartments, and we got the other building across the street.
So
And
I
it will
should have
be,
said something, but I know you guys know.
right, I
and There's
know,
no
I
record,
know,
so
I know.
I skipped over that.
right,
Yeah.
right. And again, sometimes you get folks at home listening, or they review the meeting minutes later, so I wanted to bring that up.
It's a good point.
And then additionally, at the next stage, if we get to that stage, you will be doing a traffic study?
The police have requested one for the 32 units. For 16, I don't think that we'd voluntarily do a traffic study. I think the numbers are going to be insignificant on trip generation. They were almost insignificant on as 32. But, I can't really, I'd have to go back to the police, back to TRC, really. I mean, it's like Mr. Smith said, it's 50% less. So,
Oh, yeah.
The board is in agreement that our maximum would be around 16, 4 or 4. I think that's what
well, I still disagree with that, but I'm not here to argue that. But I mean, if it gets to it, we will, but it'll never get to it, right? I'm not gonna go to preliminary, lose and take an appeal, like Joelle was saying, like, she spent a lot of dough already, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna spend a lot of dough to come here and lose and then win at state court. I wish I could have recorded that guy when he was up here, but I mean, that's the life.
I think me personally, what I'm looking at is what could be there a general business? And what's the good fit? And I'm
I have a design in my file for a 12-unit contracted garage. That's what it was gonna be. Allowed by right. Fits in the variances. But, they changed the law. This looked a little more attractive. It is a better spot. It's a better spot for an apartment building than it is for 12 contracted garages.
I agree. That's why we're trying to get a balance. And that's what pre-app's for.
Yeah.
So if you want to come back again and
White? I don't know. On the paper, black and white, yeah?
you want to come back for another pre-app, if
Oh, I have to. Yeah, I
if
can't
the applicant is okay with
go to
that. no.
preliminary.
The applicant could say, we can't do it then.
Right, it's either dead or I'll be back for pre-app. So, I'll be back for pre-app with my 12 contracted garages, and we'll be talking about backup bells and, buzzes instead of backup warnings, and, we already know what we're gonna say. Yeah, right. All right, well, we got some math to do. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're at the director's report.
I'll keep it 1 minute. We are working on changes to the subdivision and land development regulations. A lot of what we're doing is general cleanup of small items or errant items, or honestly, things that seem to be forgotten in time. There's two things that are worth bringing up. One is that we are going to be moving away from doing roadway standards by zone, which is currently, our code tells us if you're in a certain zoning district, then you get a certain roadway design, a certain width. For example, in the R20 district, a 30-foot wide width. We are frequently waiving those widths. We're frequently reducing it. Another approach that we're working on with our consultant is that we would dictate road width based on the scale of the project as opposed to the zone that it's in. You can have different scales projects in any given zone, and that should dictate if there's a new roadway. It's really about the scale of the project, and oftentimes 30 feet isn't needed even with a larger scale project. And then the other point was we have code in our subdivision regulations revolving around specific design criteria for village commercial zones. I'm curious to pick the board's brain. Have you, do you have projects that you recall in the village zones? There's a village rural commercial, village Main Street commercial, where you really liked the standards that you saw. When we reviewed it, we weren't very familiar with it. We haven't had a lot of projects in it. And to us, some of the standards seemed a little vague, and we wanted to address that, or at least there were chunks of it we weren't quite sure on. Before we took the action of proposing removal of code, I wanted to know if this board had experience with that code.
Village Rural, we had a couple applications down the western end, but they never came to fruition.
Yeah.
Village Main are very limited. We just did a Village Main.
Yeah. Can we turn on your mic?
Yeah, Dollar General.
Yeah, it's hard to make the Dollar General that much more aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I reviewed some of the sections of code, and this is worth staff, I mean, Alex is putting a lot of time into this. We identified code that we were like, man, this should just come out. But I don't want to provide you at some point with, hey, here's a series of changes. We're taking all of this out. And you guys say, no, we loved this. Before you arrived, we had a handful of projects. This code was great. I'm not hearing that about village commercial design code. Talking about, it's not really changing the use structure, the uses. It's about the design and the look of the properties. Sounds like you guys are kind of comfortable if there's some of that language that gets pulled out or tamed down.
Yeah, I am.
Understood. There's nothing else that's worth getting into. If you guys have questions, and again, I'll put it out there. If you guys see things in the subregs that you guys have always struggled with, maybe you come across it, feel free to reach out individually, let us know. We're just trying to clean it up and get into good shape.
Any of those village main, are there any historical boxes that need to get checked with some of those? Like, there's no, I'm just thinking that some of those items might have been related to keeping the, the facade of the buildings to match some of the older buildings in town, which basically are from Anthony all the way down. I'm not saying take them out as long as, but I just didn't know if it was like, yeah, we're going to take them all out, but guess what? They're still going to have to go to historic. It's no overlay district, nothing like that.
No, we really don't
No
have.
paned windows in the building, none of that stuff.
No, I mean,
Flat roofs.
I'm going to defer to Alex on this one, but he's suggesting no. I mean, he doesn't think that the village zones tend to overlap a lot with the historic structures. We don't have much of a historic overlay.
They've gone, kind of going away anyway. I was just
Yeah.
asking. I mean, after we lost the Reed building down there was another building that the town tried to preserve, and it got so badly deteriorated, it got demolished. That's the one next to the liquor store.
Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of them have just been converted to multifamily when you go a little further down.
All right, go ahead.
One quick
Yeah, we've jumped a little bit. The reason why we jumped recently had a lot more to do with the fact that some law changed around being able to capture vouchers, which there's any number of vouchers, affordable housing vouchers that exist in the community, and they literally travel with a person. And we're now able to count those. That like jumped our number by a couple hundred, but that was really more not because we got a lot new vouchers. It was because state law changed. We're probably going to gain some because we can count every mobile home in a certain context, that's on an owner-occupied lot as affordable. You don't count every mobile home. You count every mobile home as a half a unit. But some of our developments aren't owner, the owners of the units don't have stake in the ownership of the land. So that's going to take some review. So we're probably in the 6.5% range, to be honest. That doesn't, a jump by a couple hundred units, you get a percentage point, we're still a ways away. As you guys are aware, generally, we're getting a lot of projects and a lot of growth. And a lot of the growth that we're looking to get, we do have a consistent approach of seeking some affordable, so we don't slide back away. And I think that there's a good chance that number will continue to rise because of how much, we've got projects that shall not be named, but, we're seeking projects where we're getting 18%, 20% from projects in which it wasn't a regulatory requirement. I mean, that helps make huge gains. And these are projects that aren't just a dozen units. These are projects with hundreds of units. So I think we're on the right track. And we are addressing, an increase in the supply and the stock, which is a good thing, for our community. Let's keep in mind that, there's a vision out there of what affordable housing is, but to be frank, you can be eligible for affordable housing if you make $90,000 a year. So, I mean, I think there's still some degree of misconception of what affordable is. Yeah. 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 But, yeah. But I'll be honest, I think that the discussions we've had at the board level and at and these projects that are higher and complex, I haven't seen that there's a great disconnect between the positive attributes of affordable housing and people that are seeing it a different way. Most of the complex projects that we get, I feel like the board and the community, that doesn't tend to be the conversation around it. So I think that there's kind of some general recognition of the value. I'm not saying that's 100% across the board, but I feel like there's been recognition of the value of it, of let's make sure that, a lot of it's a middle income that can fit in these units. Yeah. Yeah.
I think in the next few years, we're going to be getting very close to the 10%.
I think that that's a good point, Ron. And there's actually what will probably end up happening. That's 2025. The funny thing is that affordable counts happen on every year. Every year they come out with an official number of what's our affordable housing number. The equation is affordable housing as the top of the division, and then the bottom of that equation is the total number of housing stock in the community. They don't change the total number of housing stock in the community until the decennial census. As projects come online and as affordable units get built, the numerator of the equation ups every year. The denominator stays frozen. So what's going to happen is we may very well hit 10% in 2029, but then 2030 hits and we might be back underneath, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth making the progress we are. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're heading to a place where 10% doesn't dissolve the ability for someone to bring a comprehensive permit. That's where state law is also changing. It changes the tune around the review, but it doesn't dissolve it. State law is not heading for this. You get to 10%, you're all done. They're heading for you get to 10%, and there's a different parameters of review. But these are good questions. These are, I mean, a lot of this discussion. I don't think our subregs are going to touch much on it. A lot of this is dictated by state law, but it's still valid questions to ask in the director's report. I'm just making that connection. It's understood the rationale of this discussion makes sense underneath a subdivision and regulation type of discussion. It is. It is, and as you guys are aware, you've seen the pre-applications, you've seen, we've approved projects at master plan within the last calendar year with hundreds of units. You've seen the pre-applications on other projects that are coming. We're probably too early because at the end of the day, a project that's maybe has been sitting on a master plan approval for close to a year, it's hard to predict when those units will get built. Some projects you can tell they're already designing. Their goal is to get a shovel on the ground as soon as possible. Other projects, they're going through more complex design issues, and they're not racing it. So it's hard to project when that unit will be built. If someone was really racing to go, I mean, they could have units built in 2 years. They could be through our approval process, through the town planning within less than 6 months. They could be off through building permits and they could have units on the ground in 2 years, but that's a pretty quick pace. A lot of times there's more complex issues, DEM permitting that takes place for these larger scale projects. So if you were to ask me that question in 2 years, then I might say, yeah, we're actually at a point where we can kind of project some of these. Right now, it's hard to pick which projects are racing and which projects are taking their time and trying to do the permitting a certain way.
Of the for the our project, independent, go and do the and sometimes it's only just one person. I mean, that's our interest as well. I mean, that is something.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. First, I'll say that's a fair question to raise when the director's report brings up land, subdivision and land development standards. That's where some of these are. And this discussion is not about any individual project. So it's a fair question to raise underneath this director's report. So independent of any particular project, that is a discussion that's been had as to, the idea is that the town engineer is not able to provide the hours needed to get eyes on these projects on a daily or weekly basis, which is what's needed to really ensure that the layers of construction, the way that things are built are adequate. And the two paths are to ask the applicant in a way that there's communication to provide us with certifications from their own professionals that have licenses and they're stamping things and they're putting their license on the line. Or the other path is to hire almost as if it would be a peer review of the construction and inspection process. That's much more expensive than working with an applicant to say, we're going to ask your engineer to, you can imagine what it would look like if someone said, hey, I'm at another milestone step in the process. I'd like your peer reviewer to come out. Okay, well, let's see what the peer reviewer's schedule is like. Oh, they can make it out in 5 days. It would halt everything. Whereas if a developer's working with their own team, they're able to nimbly get people in and out when they need to. And then an engineer feels like they got enough eyes on it and access to it where they can stamp it comfortably. There's been a lot of discussion around that, independent of any particular project, on trying to get this right so that we get good projects built the way they should have been according to design. But we're trying to hold the line in a fair way. We do understand that, holding the line somewhere means there's costs, and we're trying to do it in a way where we're respecting that. And so we're not seeking like the peer review of that, but we are seeking good information provided to us that the town engineer can rely on.
Signed to the core. What I would do is I sit on the project or hit milestones. But out there just to make sure.
Yep.
Right. Got to the point. Projects, there's only one of me, 4 projects. We hired some guys that reported to me.
Yep.
Something to that.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, no. No.
like, you have their licensed engineer stand, this is how we did it. We took the soil sand, or out of the asphalt and off on it. It's on their license.
Yeah, and we count on that. So I think we are very conscious. We've done research, we've called around, we've talked to municipalities to make sure we're trying to draw the line in a fair place. But we're also trying to ensure that what gets built is what was designed. And you can, obviously those people that are involved in construction know it never ends up exactly as designed, but that degree of flexibility and how far is someone allowed to go before you say, hey, that's really different. Joe does a great job of that. He's very fair. But it's tough when your first call is you're coming out to the site and everything's already covered. You're looking at what's on the surface and you're being asked, hey, verify this is all exactly what was designed. It's, that's why we're seeking for the applicants to come with some greater level of assurance to us of what can't be seen with the naked eye.
One last comment. Motion to adjourn
Motion.
at 9:27.